The CEO of a billion-dollar empire stood trembling in an alley, designer heels broken, wedding dress torn, three men closing in. She'd run from everything, the champagne, the lies, the loveless future her father had sold. Then headlights cut through the darkness, a battered pickup truck, a man with kind eyes and a sick child in the back seat. He asked one question. "Ma'am, you need help?" She said yes. She didn't know that single word would destroy and rebuild her entire world. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain started just after midnight, the kind that doesn't announce itself with thunder, but arrives like a whisper turning into a scream. Emma Sullivan stood beneath a broken streetlight in the Riverside district, the part of the city where even taxi drivers locked their doors at red lights, and felt the cold water soak through the ivory silk of her engagement gown. The fabric clung to her skin like a second layer of shame. Her phone was dead. The battery icon had blinked its final warning 20 minutes ago, right after the GPS had guided her into this maze of chain-link fences and shuttered warehouses. She'd been so focused on running, on getting away from the Crystal Ballroom, from the 500 guests, from Christopher Morrison's perfectly practiced smile, that she hadn't noticed where her frantic driving had taken her until the Range Rover's engine had sputtered and died 3 blocks back. She'd left the vehicle there, doors locked, and started walking in heels that cost more than some people's monthly rent. One of them had broken within 50 yards. Now she limped forward, barefoot, the broken shoe clutched in her hand like a weapon, though she knew it would be useless if she actually needed one. The street stretched empty in both directions, lined with buildings that looked abandoned but probably weren't. Somewhere a dog barked, the sound vicious and territorial. Emma's breath came in short bursts that had nothing to do with the cold. "Think," she whispered to herself, the word barely audible over the rain drumming on metal roofs. "Think, Emma." But thinking was exactly what had gotten her into this mess. Thinking about the prenuptial agreement she'd found in Christopher's study 3 days ago. Thinking about the clauses that gave him controlling interest in Sullivan Industries the moment they said, "I do." Thinking about her father's hand on her shoulder at the rehearsal dinner, his voice low and final. "This is what's best for the company, Emma. What's best for our legacy." Not what was best for her. Never what was best for her. She'd smiled through the rehearsal, smiled through the toasts, smiled through Christopher's kiss, which had tasted like expensive whiskey and casual ownership. And then 2 hours into her own engagement party, while her father worked the room and Christopher posed for photographs, she'd walked out a side door, climbed into her car, and driven. Just driven. Away from the life that had been planned for her before she was old enough to choose. Away from the boardrooms and the expectations and the careful smile she'd learned to wear like armor. She'd driven until the city lights had faded behind her, until the GPS had cheerfully announced it was recalculating, until the engine had made a sound like surrender and left her here. Here, in a neighborhood where people didn't ask questions because they didn't want to know the answers. Emma's foot found something sharp, broken glass, maybe, or metal, and she gasped, stumbling against a chain-link fence. The impact rattled through her ribs, and for a moment she just stood there, fingers wrapped around cold metal, letting the rain wash over her face. This was stupid. This was so incredibly stupid. But God, it had felt good to run. "Hey there!" The voice came from behind her, casual and wrong, the kind of casual that predators use when they've already decided you're prey. Emma spun, her back hitting the fence, and saw 3 figures emerging from between 2 buildings. Men, all of them, wearing jackets that didn't look warm enough for the weather, and expressions that didn't need to be seen clearly to be understood. "You lost?" The one in front was tall, with a face made sharp by either genetics or hard living. "This ain't really a neighborhood for—" He gestured at her dress, at the diamonds still hanging from her ears because she'd forgotten to take them off. Whatever you are?" Emma's fingers tightened around her broken heel. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought they might hear it. "I'm fine," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Years of boardroom negotiations, of staring down men who thought her father's company should be theirs, had taught her how to sound confident, even when she was terrified. "Yeah?" The second man, shorter and stockier, smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You don't look fine. You look expensive and wet and lost. They were closer now, fanning out slightly, and Emma understood with sudden, crystalline clarity that this wasn't just danger. This was the kind of danger that ended with police reports and hospital rooms and trauma she'd carry forever, if she was lucky. My phone's dead, she said, hating how the words came out like a plea. If you could just point me toward, we could point you lots of places. The third man, who hadn't spoken yet, moved to her left, cutting off that angle of escape. His voice was softer than the others, which somehow made it worse. Question is, what's it worth to you? Emma's mind raced. She had cash in the car? No, wait, the car was blocks away and probably already stripped for parts. She had credit cards in her purse. No, her purse was back at the Crystal Ballroom, sitting on a chair next to Christopher's mother. She had nothing except jewelry that screamed wealth and a dress that screamed helpless. I can pay you, she said quickly. Tomorrow. I can meet you anywhere. And tomorrow. The tall one laughed. That's cute. See, the thing about tomorrow is it's not today, and today's when we're all standing here getting rained on. He took another step forward. So let's talk about today. Emma raised the broken heel like it might actually help. Her hand shook. Stay back. Or what? The stocky one grinned. You gonna stab me with your shoe? They all laughed at that, the sound bouncing off the wet pavement, and Emma felt something crack inside her chest. Not fear anymore, but fury. Fury at herself for being stupid enough to run without a plan. Fury at her father for building a cage so beautiful she hadn't seen the bars until she was 32 years old. Fury at Christopher for being exactly what men like him always were. Fury at a world where she could run a company with 3,000 employees but couldn't walk down a street without being prey. I said stay back. Her voice rose, sharp enough to cut through the rain. I'm warning you. You're warning us? The tall one's smile vanished. Lady, you got no idea where you are or how this works. You're alone. You're lost. And you're about to learn that money don't mean shit on this side of headlights. They burst around the corner like a searchlight, bright and sudden, illuminating the scene in harsh white clarity. Emma saw the men's faces clearly for the first time, saw the way they turned, squinting, caught like animals in the beam, saw her own shadow stretched long and desperate against the fence. The vehicle slowed. An old pickup truck, blue paint faded to almost gray, one headlight slightly dimmer than the other. It pulled to a stop maybe 10 feet away, engine idling rough. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out into the rain. He wasn't tall, maybe 5'10", with shoulders that spoke of physical work and a face that looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Dark hair plastered to his forehead, jeans and a hoodie that had seen better years, work boots that splashed in puddles as he walked toward them with the kind of unhurried confidence that made Emma's breath catch. Evening, gentlemen, he said, and his voice was quiet but carried weight, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Something I can help you with? The tall one, the leader, Emma had already labeled him, turned fully. This ain't your business, man. Keep driving. Yeah, see, that's the thing. The newcomer stopped about 5 feet away, close enough to be a presence, but far enough to keep his hands relaxed at his sides. I got a sick kid in my truck. Been at the ER for 3 hours. All I want is to get home, get him into bed, maybe sleep for 4 hours before my shift starts. He glanced at Emma, and something in his eyes made her throat tight. But I can't do that if I drive past a woman who needs help. My mama would come back and haunt me. Your mama ain't here, the stocky one said. No, she's not, but she raised me right anyway. He looked back at the three men, and Emma saw the way his posture shifted, just slightly, weight settling onto the balls of his feet, hands still loose but ready. This was a man who knew how to fight, who maybe had fought. So here's how this goes. The lady gets in my truck. I drive her wherever she needs to go. You three keep walking. Everybody lives to see tomorrow. The tall one laughed, but it sounded forced. You threatening us? No, sir. I'm real tired and my kid's got a fever, and I genuinely don't have the energy for this conversation to go the other way. The man's voice stayed level, almost conversational. But if you make me choose between your feelings and her safety, I know which one I'm picking, and I'm guessing you know it too. The silence stretched. Rain pattered on metal and concrete. From inside the truck, Emma heard a small voice. Dad? It's okay, Eli, the man called back, not taking his eyes off the three men. Just talking to some folks. Be done in a minute. Emma watched the calculation happen in the tall one's face. 3 against 1 should have been easy odds, but there was something about this stranger, this tired man with a sick kid and work boots, that made those odds less certain. Something that said he'd been tested before and hadn't broken. Whatever. The tall one spat on the ground. She ain't worth the trouble anyway. Smart choice, the stranger said, and somehow managed to make it sound like he meant it rather than mocking them. The 3 men backed away, hands in pockets, throwing looks that promised this wasn't over if they ever met again. But they backed away, and that was what mattered. They disappeared into the same shadows they'd emerged from, and just like that, Emma was alone with a stranger who'd just risked himself for her. Ma'am? He turned to her fully now, and up close she could see details the darkness had hidden. A scar through one eyebrow, eyes the color of worn leather, a jawline dark with stubble. You need help? Emma opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Yes, I need help. Okay. He said it like it was simple, like helping strangers in the rain was just what people did. Where's your car? 3 blocks that way. She pointed with the hand still holding her broken heel, realized how ridiculous she must look, and felt something between a laugh and a sob build in her chest. It died, and my phone's dead, and The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I ran away from my own engagement party, and now I'm in the worst part of the city, and I don't even know how I got here. He studied her for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair, and Emma waited for judgment, for the questions, for the inevitable recognition, because even soaked and bedraggled, she was Emma Sullivan, and people knew that name. But all he said was, "Been one of those nights, huh?" And despite everything, the fear still pumping through her veins, the cold rain, the absolute disaster her life had become, Emma laughed. It came out shaky and a little unhinged, but it was real. Yeah, she said. One of those nights. Well, come on then. He gestured toward the truck. Let's get you somewhere safe. Emma hesitated, and he must have seen it because he added, I got a 7-year-old in that truck who barely knows I exist when he's got a fever. My threat level is pretty low. But if you'd rather wait here for your phone to magically charge itself, I understand. No. She pushed away from the fence, wincing as her cut foot hit the pavement. No, I'll take my chances with you. Smart. He walked beside her to the truck, matching her limping pace. Relatively speaking, anyway. What's your name, if you don't mind me asking? Emma paused with her hand on the passenger door handle. This was the moment where she could be honest or careful, Emma Sullivan or just Emma, the CEO or the woman who'd run. Emma? She said finally. Just Emma. Jack Turner, he replied, opening the door for her. And that bundle of misery in the back is my son, Eli. Emma climbed into the truck, the interior warm and cluttered with the debris of real life, fast food wrappers, a child's backpack, a stuffed dinosaur, papers covered in crayon drawings. In the back seat, a small boy huddled under a blanket, his face flushed with fever, dark hair sticking up in all directions. Hi, Eli whispered, his voice hoarse. Hi, Emma whispered back, something in her chest squeezing tight. Jack climbed into the driver's seat, water dripping from his hoodie, and put the truck in gear. Where am I taking you, just Emma? And that was the question, wasn't it? Where could she go? Not home. Home was her father's estate, and his security team would have been alerted the moment she vanished from the party. Not Christopher's penthouse, not the Crystal Ballroom, not any of the places that made up the careful geography of her life. I don't know, she admitted, and felt the weight of it settle over her. I honestly don't know. Jack was quiet for a moment, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. Then, there's a diner about 10 minutes from here, open all night, good coffee, decent pie. We can sit, you can use their phone, figure out your next move. He glanced at her. Sound okay? It sounded more than okay. It sounded like salvation. Yeah, Emma said softly. That sounds perfect. The truck pulled away from the curb, leaving the alley and the danger behind. Emma watched the dark streets slide past the window and felt something she hadn't felt in years. The peculiar lightness of having no plan, no schedule, no expectations. She was soaking wet, barefoot, probably bleeding, and riding in a stranger's truck in the worst part of the city, and for the first time in months, she could breathe. "Thank you," she said, so quietly she wasn't sure he'd hear. But Jack just nodded, his hands steady on the wheel, his feverish son breathing soft and rattling in the back seat, and said, "Don't mention it. We all need help sometimes." Tut. The diner Jack took her to was called Rosie's, a squat building with neon signage that buzzed in the rain. The parking lot held maybe 3 other vehicles, and through the windows Emma could see the warm yellow glow of fluorescent lights and a waitress wiping down empty booths. Jack parked near the entrance and killed the engine. For a moment they all just sat there, listening to the rain drum on the truck's roof. "Eli, buddy, you awake?" Jack turned in his seat. "Mm-hmm." The boy's eyes were barely open. "We're going to go inside for a bit. Get warm. Maybe some soup. How's that sound?" "'Kay." Jack looked at Emma. "You good to walk?" She glanced down at her feet, one of them definitely bleeding now, the cut from the glass deeper than she'd thought. "I'll manage." "Hold on." Jack rummaged in the glove compartment and pulled out a mostly clean t-shirt. "It's not exactly first aid, but you can wrap that foot. Better than walking in barefoot." Emma took the shirt, the fabric soft from many washings, and carefully bound her injured foot. It wasn't elegant, but it would work. They made their way inside, Jack carrying Eli, who'd wrapped himself around his father like a koala, and Emma limping behind in her torn engagement gown and makeshift bandage. The waitress looked up as they entered, and her expression went from bored to concerned in an instant. "Jack Turner, what in the world—" "Long story, Rosie." Jack headed for a corner booth. "Coffee for 2, and maybe some chicken noodle soup if you've got it warm." "I always got soup warm, you know that." Rosie, a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled into a practical bun, was already moving toward the coffee pot, but her eyes stayed on Emma. "Honey, you okay? You need me to call someone?" "I'm fine," Emma said automatically, then reconsidered. "Actually, could I borrow a phone? Mine died." "Course, sweetie, let me get you fixed up." Jack settled Eli into the booth, the boy immediately curling up on the vinyl seat, and Emma slid in across from them. The diner's warmth seeped into her bones, and she realized she was shivering, had been shivering for a while probably. Rosie returned with coffee in thick mugs, a bowl of soup, and a corded phone with an impossibly long cord. "Here you go, hun. Take your time." Emma stared at the phone. Who was she supposed to call? Her father would mobilize the entire security team and probably half the police force. Christopher would be smooth and concerned and ultimately would want her back at the party, smiling. Her assistant would panic. Her friends, did she even have friends? People she trusted with this kind of disaster? "You don't have to decide right now," Jack said quietly, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug. He'd pushed his wet hair back from his forehead, and in the diner's light Emma could see him more clearly. Mid-30s, probably. Tired eyes that had seen things. A gentle mouth that probably smiled more than it frowned, even though life had given it reasons. "I should call someone," Emma said. "Probably, but should and have to are different things." He took a sip of coffee, watching Eli rather than her. "Kid's been sick for 3 days. Fever keeps spiking. Took him to the ER twice. They say it's viral. Should pass. Keep him hydrated." His jaw tightened. "Second time cost me $400 just to be told the same thing." Emma heard what he wasn't saying, that $400 mattered, that taking 3 nights off work to watch his son probably mattered, that life was a series of calculations where every choice had weight. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked. "Yeah, kids are tougher than they look." Jack smiled slightly, a real smile that transformed his tired face. "His mom used to say he got his stubbornness from me." She was right. Used to say, past tense. "I'm sorry," Emma said, understanding clicking into place. "Don't be. She was sick a long time. When she passed, it was—" He paused, searching for the word. "Gentle, I guess. As gentle as that kind of thing can be. And Eli was only 4, so his memories are more like feelings now, warmth and safety and love, but not specifics. He looked at Emma then, really looked at her. You don't gotta tell me what you're running from, but I know the look. That's someone who hit a wall and decided to go through it instead of stopping. Emma's throat tightened. Is it that obvious? Wedding dress, expensive jewelry, no phone, no plan? Jack raised an eyebrow. Either you're running or you're the world's worst prepared runaway bride. Despite everything, Emma laughed. The second one, maybe. Well, for what it's worth, I don't think you're worst at anything. He pushed the coffee cup toward her. Drink. You're still shaking. She did, and the coffee was terrible in the way that diner coffee always was, burnt and strong and somehow exactly right. The warmth spread through her chest, loosening the knot that had lived there for days. I'm supposed to get married in 3 weeks, she heard herself say. To a man I don't love. To save a company I'm not sure I want. And tonight, I found out that the whole thing, the engagement, the merger, all of it, is designed to take away the only thing I've ever had that was really mine. The words kept coming, unstoppable now. So I ran. No plan, no destination. I just got in my car and drove until it stopped working, and then I kept going on foot, and then those men, and then you. Jack listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. And now I'm sitting in a diner at 1 a.m. with a stranger and his sick kid, and I should be terrified or ashamed or something, but mostly I just feel... Emma trailed off, searching for the word. Free. Is that insane? Nah, Jack smiled. That's just honest. Freedom's terrifying and feels insane the first time you taste it. He glanced at Eli, who'd fallen asleep breathing soft and congested into his blanket. When my wife died, I had a choice. I could keep working the engineering job that paid well but ate my soul, or I could quit and open the garage I'd always wanted. Took me 6 months to decide. 6 months of being responsible and sensible and scared. What changed? Eli asked me why I was always sad. Jack's voice went rough. Kid was 4 years old, barely understood his mom was gone, and he could see I was dying inside, so I quit. Opened Turner's Auto Repair with everything we had saved. Most terrifying thing I ever did. Do you regret it? Every time the rent's due, he grinned. And never, not once, when I'm under a hood or teaching Eli how to change oil. Money's tight, hours are long, but it's mine. That's worth something. Emma looked at this man, this stranger who'd saved her from God knows what, who carried his feverish son without complaint, who'd risked himself for no reason except that it was right, and felt something shift in her chest. A recognition, a kinship. I need to make some calls, she said slowly. But not tonight. Tonight I just need to not be Emma Sullivan for a while. Then don't be, Jack signaled Rosie for refills. Be just Emma, the woman who ran away from her engagement and ended up in a diner with 2 strangers. That version's probably more fun anyway. And God help her, Emma smiled. Really smiled, the kind that used muscles she'd forgotten she had. They stayed there for 2 hours, talking about nothing and everything. Jack told her about rebuilding carburetors and the way Eli insisted on wearing mismatched socks. Emma told him about board meetings that felt like gladiatorial combat and the strange loneliness of being powerful. They didn't talk about her last name or his lack of one, about the chasm of wealth and experience between them. They just talked. Around 3 a.m., Eli woke up crying, and Jack soothed him with practiced ease, checking his temperature, getting him to drink water, humming something soft and formless. Emma watched the careful tenderness of it and felt her heart crack open just slightly. I should let you get him home, she said finally. Yeah? Jack looked reluctant. You figure out where you're going? A hotel I can walk to. I'll drive you. You don't have to. I know. Jack stood, Eli drooping against his shoulder. But I'm going to anyway. Humor me. So Emma let herself be driven to the Riverside Inn, a mid-range hotel that didn't ask questions when a barefoot woman in a torn wedding dress paid cash for a room. Jack waited while she checked in, Eli asleep in his arms, and when she came back out with her keycard, he said, You gonna be okay? Emma looked at him, at this man who'd appeared when she'd needed help and asked for nothing in return, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Gratitude, yes, but more than that. Interest. Connection. The spark of possibility. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I am." "Good." Jack shifted Eli's weight. "Take care of yourself, just Emma." "Wait." She touched his arm before she could stop herself. Could I get your number in case I need, I don't know, a mechanic or someone who makes terrible life decisions seem reasonable?" He smiled at that, tired but genuine. "Yeah, okay." He rattled off the digits, which she entered into the hotel phone by the registration desk since hers was still dead. "But fair warning, I'm not great with the whole texting thing. Takes me 10 minutes to send okay." "I'll keep that in mind." They stood there for a moment longer, rain still falling outside, the night hovering between ending and continuing. "Thank you," Emma said, and meant it more than she'd meant anything in years. "For everything." "Don't mention it." Jack headed for the door, then paused and looked back. "Hey, Emma. Whatever you decide about the wedding and the company and all that, choose the version of yourself you can live with. The rest is just noise." Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, taking his son and his kindness and his unexpected wisdom back into the rain. Emma stood in the lobby of a strange hotel, wearing a ruined engagement gown, and felt more like herself than she had in a decade. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know how she'd explain her disappearance or what consequences waited, didn't know if she'd ever see Jack Turner again or if this night would fade into the category of strange memories that felt more like dreams. But she knew one thing with crystalline certainty: she wasn't going back. Not to Christopher, not to her father's plans, not to the cage that had been built around her with silk ropes and golden bars. Emma Sullivan had run away from her engagement party. And now, finally, she was going to run towards something instead. She just had to figure out what that something was. The morning after her escape, Emma woke to sunlight streaming through cheap hotel curtains and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. For 3 beautiful seconds, her mind was blank. No responsibilities, no expectations, just the warmth of unfamiliar sheets and the distant hum of traffic. Then reality crashed back in waves. The engagement party. The rain. The alley. Jack Turner's tired eyes and gentle hands as he'd carried his sleeping son. Emma sat up, her body aching in places she hadn't known could ache, and caught sight of herself in the mirror across from the bed. Her hair hung in tangles, mascara smudged beneath her eyes like bruises. The engagement dress lay in a sodden heap on the bathroom floor where she'd peeled it off at 4 a.m. She looked like someone who'd survived something. She supposed she had. Her phone, plugged into the complimentary charger, showed 47 missed calls and 93 text messages. Emma stared at the numbers without opening any of them. She could imagine the content well enough. Her father's clipped fury, Christopher's wounded confusion, her assistant's professional panic. The whole machinery of her life demanding she return and explain and apologize and resume her place in the careful choreography they'd designed for her. Instead, she ordered room service, coffee and scrambled eggs and toast she ate with her fingers like a kid, and spent an hour in the shower until the water ran cold. By the time she emerged wrapped in the hotel's thin robe, she'd made a decision. She wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But first she needed to say thank you properly. The problem was that Jack Turner had given her his number, but nothing else. No address for the garage he'd mentioned, no last name she could easily search. Just a phone number and a memory of kindness that felt too fragile to risk on a text message. Emma stood in front of the mirror, towel drying her hair, and made another decision. She'd find him. She'd go back to that neighborhood in daylight, ask around, track down Turner's auto repair. She'd thank him properly, maybe offer to pay for... No. She stopped that thought immediately. Jack had the look of a man who'd be insulted by charity, disguised as gratitude. Whatever thanks she offered had to be genuine, had to respect the dignity of what he'd done. She dressed in the only clothes she had, yoga pants and an oversized sweater she'd grabbed from her car's trunk during a rare moment of foresight months ago, and used the hotel's business center to print a map of the Riverside district. The clerk, a young guy with kind eyes, didn't comment on her lack of shoes. "Excuse me," Emma said as he handed her the printout. "Do you know anything about auto repair shops in this area? Specifically one called Turner's?" He brightened. "Oh yeah, Jack's place. Good guy. Fixed my transmission for half what the dealer wanted." He grabbed a pen and circled a location on her map. "Right there, can't miss it. Blue building with white trim. Says honest work, honest price on the sign." "Thank you." Emma clutched the map like a treasure. "Fair warning, though, he's usually slammed this time of day. Might have to wait a bit." She didn't mind waiting. The Riverside district looked different in daylight. Still rough around the edges, still the kind of place where people minded their own business, but less menacing. The alley where she'd nearly met disaster was just an alley. Trash bins and chain link, and the ordinary decay of neglected urban spaces. Hard to believe it had held such terror only hours ago. Emma found the garage wedged between a laundromat and a boarded-up convenience store. The building was exactly as described. Blue paint faded by sun and time, white trim that needed touching up, and a hand-painted sign that proclaimed Turner's Auto Repair in confident letters. Below that, honest work, honest price. No appointment needed. Through the open bay door, Emma could see a pair of legs extending from beneath a lifted sedan. Classic rock played from a radio covered in grease stains. The air smelled like motor oil and hot metal and hard work. She stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing here? Jack had helped her, yes, but that didn't mean he wanted her showing up at his workplace, disrupting his day. He probably had customers waiting, bills to pay, a sick son to worry about. The last thing he needed was a runaway CEO complicating his life. But before Emma could talk herself into leaving, a small face appeared in the garage's side window. Eli. His dark hair sticking up exactly as it had last night, his nose pressed against the glass. Their eyes met, and his face split into a surprised smile. "Dad!" His voice carried through the open bay. "Dad, that lady's here!" The legs under the car went still. Then Jack rolled out on a creeper, his face smudged with grease, wearing coveralls that had seen 1,000 repairs. He looked at Emma, and something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or concern. "Just Emma," he said, sitting up and wiping his hands on a rag that only spread the grease around. "Didn't expect to see you again." "I know. I'm sorry. I should have called first, but Emma held up a reusable shopping bag she'd picked up at a convenience store on the way. "I wanted to say thank you, properly." Jack stood, studying her with those steady brown eyes. Then he smiled slightly. "You didn't have to do that." "I did, actually." Emma stepped into the garage, hyper-aware of her bare feet on the oil-stained concrete. "You saved my life last night. That deserves more than a rushed thank you at 3 a.m. I drove you to a diner and then a hotel. Pretty sure that's just basic human decency." But he was walking toward her now, interest in something else. Warmth, maybe, in his expression. Basic human decency is shockingly rare at 1 a.m. in bad neighborhoods. Emma held out the bag. "I brought breakfast." "Well, brunch. It's almost noon." Jack took the bag, looking inside with the careful attention of someone who didn't take gifts lightly. "Coffee, bagels, cream cheese." He looked up at her. "Did you guess? Or are you mildly psychic?" "The coffee cups in your truck last night had Lou's Deli stamped on them. I took a chance." Emma felt absurdly pleased with herself. That's some detective work. Jack set the bag on a workbench cluttered with tools and parts. "Eli, come say hi properly." The boy appeared from a doorway that led to what looked like a small office. He wore SpongeBob pajamas and had blanket creases on one cheek. His fever had clearly broken. His color was better, eyes brighter, but he still moved with the careful exhaustion of someone who'd been sick. "Hi," he said shyly. "Hi, Eli." Emma crouched to his level, ignoring her protesting muscles. "Feeling better?" "Yeah, Dad says I can't go to school till tomorrow, though." He made this sound like a tragedy. "Your dad's smart. Rest is important." Emma glanced at Jack. "Does he usually hang out at the garage when he's sick?" "Daycare won't take him with a fever, and I can't afford to close for 3 days." Jack said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "So he's got a setup in the office. Books, tablet with educational games, strict instructions not to touch anything that could kill him." I'm very responsible, Eli added seriously. Emma's heart squeezed. She thought of her own childhood, nannies and tutors, and her father's distant presence between business trips. She'd never had to spend sick days in a garage office while her parent worked. She'd never had a parent who had to make those kinds of choices. I bet you are, she told Eli. What do you like to do? When you're not being responsible, I mean. Legos. And drawing. And Dad's teaching me about engines. His face lit up. Did you know that a car engine is basically a bunch of tiny explosions happening really fast? I did not know that. Emma stood, smiling. That's actually kind of cool. Right? Eli bounced slightly, his earlier shyness evaporating. And Dad says when I'm older, I can help with the real repairs, not just handing him tools. That'll be a while, buddy. Jack ruffled his son's hair. Go wash your hands and you can have a bagel. The everything one's yours. Eli scampered off and Jack turned back to Emma. In the garage's fluorescent lighting, she could see details she'd missed last night. The laugh lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the way his coveralls hung on a frame that was lean from labor rather than gym membership. You really didn't have to come, he said quietly. I meant what I said. Helping you wasn't something that needed repaying. I know, but I wanted to. Emma tucked her hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious. And honestly, I woke up this morning in that hotel room, looked at 93 messages from my real life, and thought, I'd rather go see the guy who didn't ask questions and just helped. So here I am. Being selfish, probably. Jack's expression softened. That's not selfish. That's human. He paused, wiping his hands again, even though they weren't going to get cleaner. You figure out what you're going to do about the wedding and all that? Not yet. I'm living 1 hour at a time right now. Emma looked around the garage, at the car on the lift, the organized chaos of tools, the calendar on the wall covered in Eli's crayon editions. This is a nice place. Feels honest. That's the goal. Can't always pay the bills with honesty, but I sleep okay at night. Jack grabbed 2 folding chairs from against the wall and set them up near the workbench. You got time to sit? I should eat before my 1 o'clock shows up. I've got nothing but time. Emma sat, accepting the coffee and bagel he handed her. That's a weird feeling. Yeah? What's your normal feeling? Suffocating. The word came out before Emma could stop it, raw and true. Every hour scheduled, every decision analyzed, every move calculated for maximum benefit to the company, to the family legacy, to everyone except the person actually living the life. Jack bit into his bagel, chewing thoughtfully. Sounds exhausting. It is. It was. Past tense, I guess, since I just blew it all up. Emma laughed, but it came out shaky. I ran away from my engagement party, Jack, just left. 500 guests, a string quartet, champagne that costs more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. My father's probably disowned me by now. Has he? I haven't checked my messages. Then maybe he hasn't. Jack took a sip of coffee. Or maybe he has, and you're free. Either way, you won't know until you look. I know. I'm just not ready for the answer yet. Emma picked at her bagel. Can I ask you something? When you decided to leave your engineering job and open this place, how did you know it was the right choice? I didn't. Jack said it simply. I just knew staying was the wrong one. Sometimes that's all you get. Not the certainty that you're moving towards something good, just the certainty that you can't stay where you are. Eli returned then, hands still damp from washing, and climbed into a third chair that Jack produced from somewhere. He attacked his bagel with the single-minded focus of a 7-year-old who'd been sick and was now aggressively hungry. Miss Emma, he said through a mouthful of bread and cream cheese. Chew first, buddy, Jack reminded him. Eli swallowed. Are you Dad's friend now? Emma glanced at Jack, who looked equally uncertain how to answer. I think so, Emma said slowly. If your dad doesn't mind having friends who show up unannounced with bagels. I don't mind that at all, Jack said, and something warm settled in Emma's chest. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only happens when people aren't performing for each other. Eli finished first and asked if he could show Emma his drawings. Jack nodded, and the boy ran off to fetch his sketchbook. He's a great kid, Emma said. Yeah, he is, even when he's exhausting. Jack smiled, the pride evident. His mom was an artist, not professionally, but she saw the world like an artist, all light and color and possibility. Eli got that from her. What did he get from you? Stubbornness, a tendency to take things apart to see how they work, and apparently my complete inability to stay away from people who need help. Jack looked at her pointedly. Even when those people are clearly running from something complicated. I'm not... Emma stopped. Okay, yes, I'm running from something complicated. Several somethings, actually. But I promise I'm not dangerous. No criminals chasing me, no mysterious past that's going to blow up your garage. Just a runaway bride with expensive taste in jewelry. Jack gestured at the diamonds still hanging from her ears. She'd forgotten she was wearing them. Oh, God. Emma reached up, touching the earrings. I didn't even think I should return these. They're Christopher's family heirlooms. Who's Christopher? The groom. Ex-groom? I'm not sure of the proper term for someone you left at your own engagement party. Emma unclasped the earrings, staring at them in her palm. They caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows. His grandmother's, worth probably $50,000. I'm wearing $50,000 while eating a bagel in an auto shop. Could be worse. Could be eating the earrings while wearing the bagel. Jack's deadpan delivery made Emma laugh so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. That's terrible, she gasped. Dad makes bad jokes when he likes people, Eli announced, returning with his sketchbook. Mom used to say he should be arrested by the pun police. Your mom sounds like she was smart. Emma wiped her eyes, still grinning. She was the smartest, Eli agreed. Look, these are my drawings. He opened the sketchbook, and Emma found herself looking at a child's view of the world, their small apartment rendered in careful crayon detail, a series of cars in various states of repair, a woman with long dark hair and a smile that took up half her face. That one was labeled Mom in uncertain letters. These are beautiful, Eli. Emma traced the edge of the drawing. Do you remember her? Sort of. I remember her singing and how she smelled like flowers, and Dad says I laugh like her. He flipped pages. This is our building. This is Mrs. Chen from downstairs. She's really nice, but her cat hates everybody. This is Dad fixing a car. This is... The bell above the shop door chimed, and a woman's voice called, Jack, you here? That's my 1 o'clock. Jack stood, brushing crumbs from his coveralls. Mrs. Patterson, transmission's been slipping. I can go, Emma said quickly, starting to rise. No, stay. Finish your coffee. Jack touched her shoulder briefly, just a moment of contact, but Emma felt it like electricity. I'll be 20 minutes, half-hour tops. Eli can show you the rest of his artwork. Kid's got about 6 more notebooks. I do, Eli confirmed proudly. So Emma stayed, looking through drawing after drawing while Jack disappeared into the bay to talk to Mrs. Patterson. She could hear their voices, his patient and reassuring, hers worried about cost. He quoted her a price that made Emma wince with how low it was, explained the work in terms she'd understand, and promised to have it done by end of day. Your dad's really good at this, Emma told Eli. He's the best. The boy said it with absolute conviction. He fixes everything, cars, our toaster, my Lego sets when I build them wrong. He says there's no problem that can't be solved if you're patient and have the right tools. That's a good philosophy. What's a philosophy? A way of thinking about the world, a belief system. Emma tried to simplify. Like a rule you try to follow. Oh, then yeah, it's a good one. Eli turned to a fresh page in his notebook. What's your philosophy? Emma opened her mouth to answer and realized she didn't have one. Or rather, she'd been living by her father's philosophy for so long that she didn't know what her own was. Work hard. Never show weakness. Put the company first. Marry strategically. Smile for the cameras. I'm still figuring that out, she said finally. But I think it's going to be something like your dad's, about fixing things instead of giving up on them. You can write that down, Eli offered, pushing the notebook toward her, so you don't forget. And somehow, sitting in an auto shop at noon on a Tuesday, Emma found herself writing in a 7-year-old's sketchbook. Fix things instead of giving up. She drew a little heart next to it, felt ridiculous, then decided she didn't care. Over the next hour, more customers came and went. Jack handled each with the same patient competence, listening to their problems, offering solutions, never overselling or pushing work they didn't need. Emma watched him slide under cars and emerge covered in fresh grease, explaining repairs with the ease of someone who genuinely loved what he did. During a lull, Emma asked, "Do you ever miss engineering? The stability? The salary?" Jack wiped his hands, considering. "Sometimes. Usually when rent's due and I'm 3 jobs behind, but then I remember what that life cost me. Time with Eli, time with my wife before she got too sick, time with myself. Money's important, but it's not everything." He looked at her. "I'm guessing you know that already." "I'm learning it." Emma glanced at Eli, who'd fallen asleep in his chair, sketchbook open on his lap. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have him. Kid saved my life after his mom died. Gave me a reason to get up when I wanted to stay in bed forever." Jack's voice went rough. "You got people like that? People who make you want to keep going?" Emma thought about her father, who loved the company more than his daughter, Christopher, who loved the idea of her more than the reality, her carefully curated circle of friends, most of whom were really business contacts. Did she have anyone who'd notice if she stayed in bed? Anyone who needed her for more than what she could do for them? "No," she admitted quietly. "I don't think I do." "That's going to change," Jack said with unexpected certainty. "Can tell you're the kind of person who builds things once you figure out what you want to build." "How can you tell?" "You showed up here with bagels because I helped you once. Most people would have sent a thank you card or a fruit basket. You came in person because connections matter to you, even if you haven't had many real ones." He smiled. "Plus, you're still here 3 hours later, hanging out in a garage with a strange guy and his kid. That's someone looking for something real." Emma felt her throat tighten. "Maybe I am." "Then you're in the right place. Can't get more real than this." Jack gestured at the cluttered garage, at his sleeping son, at the ordinary miracle of a life built from honest work and love. "It ain't fancy, but it's true." "I like true," Emma heard herself say. "I think I've been drowning in fancy for too long." Before Jack could respond, Eli stirred, blinking sleepily. "Did I miss anything?" "Nope, just boring adult talk," Jack assured him. "How you feeling, buddy?" "Better. Can I have another bagel?" "You just ate?" Jack checked his watch and laughed. 4 hours ago, yeah, okay. You can have another bagel. Growing boy needs food." While Eli ate, Emma found herself drawn to the window where she could see the street outside. Her world felt very far away. The penthouse, the boardroom, the carefully controlled life she'd built because she'd never questioned if it was what she wanted. Here, in this little garage in a rough neighborhood, she felt more grounded than she had in years. I should probably go, she said reluctantly, even though every part of her wanted to stay. "Let you get back to work without distractions." "You're not a distraction," Jack said it simply, like fact. "But yeah, I got 2 more cars coming in before closing. Mrs. Patterson's transmission is going to take most of the afternoon." Emma nodded, gathering her things, which amounted to nothing except her phone still clutched in one hand, still showing notifications she hadn't opened. "Thank you," she said, "for the bagels and the company and letting me hide from my life for a few hours." "You're not hiding, you're regrouping." Jack walked her to the door. "There's a difference. Hiding's about fear. Regrouping's about strategy." "When did you get so wise?" "I've had a lot of time to think while lying under cars." He smiled, and Emma noticed for the first time that he had a dimple in his left cheek. "You know where to find me if you need another regrouping session, or if you just want coffee, or if those people from last night come back." "They won't," Emma said with more confidence than she felt. "Probably not, but still." Jack's expression turned serious. "Be careful, Emma. Whatever you're running from, make sure you're running toward something too. Otherwise, you're just lost in a different way." "I'll remember that." Emma paused at the door, one more question burning. "Can I come back? Tomorrow, maybe? I could bring lunch this time." Jack's smile widened. "I'd like that." "Eli would too. Kid doesn't get much company besides me and Mrs. Chen's evil cat." "Mr. Whiskers is not evil," Eli called from inside. "He's just misunderstood." "Same thing," Jack called back. Then to Emma, "Tomorrow, Lunch? We'll be here? Emma left the garage feeling lighter than she had in months, maybe years. The afternoon sun felt warmer. The rough neighborhood seemed less threatening. Even her bare feet on the sidewalk didn't bother her. She'd walked 3 blocks before she realized she was smiling. That night, in her hotel room, Emma finally opened her messages. Her father's were exactly as expected: angry, then concerned, then coldly furious. Christopher's were wounded and confused. Her assistant had sent 17 increasingly panicked updates about rescheduling meetings and managing the PR disaster. But buried in the flood was a message from an unknown number sent that afternoon. Thanks for lunch. Eli wants you to know Mr. Whiskers is evil. I want you to know we meant what we said. Come back anytime. Jack. Emma read it 3 times, something warm blooming in her chest. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She turned her phone completely off and went to bed without setting an alarm, without planning tomorrow, without scheduling her life in 15-minute increments. She slept better than she had in a decade. The next morning, Emma woke with purpose. She bought lunch from a small Vietnamese restaurant, pho and spring rolls and iced coffee, and made her way back to Turner's Auto Repair. Jack's face lit up when he saw her, and Eli bounced with excitement, and for a few hours Emma sat in a folding chair and watched them work. She came back the day after that, and the day after that. It became routine. Emma appearing around noon with food from different restaurants, Jack and Eli welcoming her like she belonged there. She learned the rhythm of the garage, the way customers trusted Jack implicitly, how he never charged enough and always delivered more than promised. She learned that Eli was brilliant at math but struggled with reading, that he wanted to be either a mechanic or an astronaut when he grew up, that he collected rocks and believed in aliens. She learned that Jack had been married for 6 years before his wife got sick, that he'd spent 2 years watching her fade. That grief had nearly broken him, but his son had pulled him through. She learned he could fix anything mechanical but was hopeless at cooking, that he read science fiction novels and played guitar badly, that he'd turned down a lucrative job offer 3 months ago because it would have meant moving Eli away from his school and friends. And Jack learned about her, carefully, gradually, as Emma peeled back layers she'd been hiding under for years. He learned she ran a tech company she'd inherited, that her mother had died when Emma was 12, that her father had raised her to be a chess piece in his corporate empire. He learned about Christopher and the prenup and the moment she'd realized her entire life was a cage. He never pushed for details, never asked about her last name or why she kept paying for hotel rooms instead of going home. He just listened, and somehow that was exactly what Emma needed. On the 5th day, Jack handed her a wrench. "What's this for?" Emma turned it over in her hands. "Mrs. Patterson's daughter is coming in for an oil change. Figured you might want to learn something useful." Jack's eyes sparkled. "Unless you'd rather just watch." "No." Emma stood, suddenly energized. "No, I want to learn. Teach me." So Jack taught her how to check oil levels and tire pressure, how to identify the major engine components, how to change a filter and not lose the oil cap. Emma got grease under her fingernails and oil on her borrowed shirt and felt more accomplished than she had closing any business deal. "You're a natural," Jack said, watching her work. "I'm terrible at this." "Yeah, but you're terrible with confidence. That's the important part." He bumped her shoulder gently. "Most people are afraid to try. You just dive in." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation. Whether it's a compliment depends on whether you dive into good things or bad things." He gave her a look. "Jury's still out." Emma laughed, wiping her hands on a rag. "Fair point." Eli appeared at her elbow. "Miss Emma, can you help me with my homework?" "What subject?" "Reading." He made a face. "We're supposed to read a whole chapter about frogs, and it's so boring." "I'll make you a deal," Emma said, crouching to his level. "You read me a paragraph, and I'll read you a paragraph. We'll take turns. Make it less boring." "Okay?" Eli ran to get his book. Jack watched this exchange with an expression Emma couldn't quite read, soft and a little sad and something else. When Eli was out of earshot, he said quietly, "You're good with him. He makes it easy." "No, that's—" Jack paused, searching for words. "His mom used to read with him like that, taking turns, making it a game. I try, but I'm not—" He trailed off. You're doing great, Emma said firmly. He's happy and healthy and kind. That's all because of you. Maybe. Or maybe he's just a good kid who deserves better than a dad who's always covered in grease and barely scraping by. Emma straightened, setting down the wrench carefully. Jack Turner, that boy worships you. You know that, right? Every drawing in those notebooks features you. Every story he tells ends with, and Dad fixed it. You're his whole world. His world should be bigger. It will be. But right now, you're exactly what he needs. Emma touched his arm. She'd gotten comfortable with that over the past few days, small touches that meant connection. Stop questioning whether you're enough. You are. Jack looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then Eli returned with his frog book, and the moment passed. They read together in the garage office, alternating paragraphs about amphibian life cycles, and Emma realized she was happier than she'd been in years. No boardroom, no expectations, just a 7-year-old's hand in hers and his father's quiet presence nearby. This, she thought, was what life was supposed to feel like. That evening, as Emma prepared to leave, Jack said, "You ever gonna tell me your last name?" Emma's heart stuttered. "Does it matter?" "Not really. You could be Jane Doe for all I care." He smiled slightly. But I can tell it matters to you. Like you're worried once I know. I'll treat you different." "Will you?" "Try me and find out." Emma took a breath. "Sullivan. Emma Sullivan." She watched his face carefully, waiting for recognition. Most people knew the name. Sullivan Industries was big enough to make news, and her engagement to Christopher Morrison had been announced in the business section of every major paper, but Jack just nodded slowly. "Sullivan. That's a good name. Irish? Somewhere way back, I think. My mom was half Irish, used to make soda bread every Sunday." He wiped his hands on his coveralls. "So, Emma Sullivan, I'll see you tomorrow?" "You will." Emma felt dizzy with relief. He either didn't know or didn't care, and either way, she was still just Emma to him. She was halfway back to the hotel when her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, Emma answered. "Miss Sullivan?" The voice was smooth and professional. "This is Marcus Chen, head of security for Sullivan Industries. Your father has asked me to contact you." Emma's stomach dropped. "How did you get this number?" "Your phone's GPS, ma'am. We've been tracking your location for several days now, per your father's instructions after your departure from the engagement party." Of course they had. Of course her father would have had her phone traced. She'd been so caught up in her little bubble of freedom that she'd forgotten about the reach of Sullivan Industries. "Tell my father I'm fine," Emma said carefully. "I'll come home when I'm ready." "Miss Sullivan, I'm afraid that's not acceptable. Mr. Sullivan has made arrangements for your return. A car will be at your hotel in 1 hour." "No." The word came out sharp. "I'm not coming back yet." "Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't a request. Mr. Sullivan has concerns about your associations. The neighborhood you've been frequenting isn't safe for someone in your position." Emma felt cold wash over her. "What associations?" "Turner's Auto Repair. You've been spending considerable time there. Mr. Sullivan feels this connection could be problematic both personally and professionally." They'd been watching her, following her, documenting her visits to Jack's garage. Emma's fingers tightened around the phone. "You tell my father," she said slowly, each word deliberate, "that my associations are my own business. And if he sends a car to collect me like I'm a piece of property, I'll disappear in a way that GPS can't track." "Miss Sullivan," Emma hung up. "Chaz." She stood on the sidewalk, hands shaking, and understood that her bubble had just burst. The real world, her father's world, with its power and reach and absolute refusal to let her go, had found her. And worse, it had found Jack. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat in her hotel room watching the parking lot, waiting for black SUVs that never came. Her father was many things, controlling, cold, ruthlessly efficient, but he wasn't stupid. He'd give her the night to stew in the knowledge that she'd been found, that her little escape had been monitored from the beginning, that there was no such thing as truly getting away. By dawn, Emma had made a decision. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. But she also wouldn't let her father's reach destroy the one good thing she'd stumbled into. She needed to warn Jack. The garage didn't open until 8, but Emma arrived at 7:30, coffee and pastries in hand like armor. She found Jack already there, the bay door half open, working on a truck that looked like it had survived several small wars. He looked up as she approached, and his smile faded when he saw her face. What happened? He set down his wrench immediately. Can we talk? Inside? Emma glanced at the street, suddenly paranoid about security cameras and surveillance. Jack led her to the small office where Eli usually did his homework. The space was cluttered but clean, papers organized in careful stacks, a coffee maker that looked older than Emma, photographs tacked to a corkboard showing Eli at various ages, always with that same brilliant smile. You look terrified, Jack said quietly. Talk to me. Emma set down the coffee and pastries, her hands shaking slightly. I need to tell you something. About who I am. About why I was in that neighborhood the night we met. Okay. Jack leaned against the desk, giving her space, his expression open and patient. My full name is Emma Sullivan. I'm the CEO of Sullivan Industries. We do tech manufacturing, supply chain management, some software development. 3,000 employees across 6 states. Revenue last year was just over $2 billion. The words came out mechanical, rehearsed from 1,000 investor meetings. My father built the company from nothing. When my mother died, he poured everything into making it succeed. And when I turned 25, he made me CEO because he wanted the Sullivan name to continue leading it. Jack's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of it. The man I was supposed to marry is Christopher Morrison. His family owns Morrison Logistics. They're our biggest competitor. The engagement was strategic, a merger disguised as a romance, designed to consolidate market share and eliminate competition. Emma's voice went hollow. I found the prenup 3 days before the party. It gave Christopher controlling interest in Sullivan Industries the moment we married. My father essentially sold the company, and me, to close a deal. Jesus, Jack breathed. So I ran. I got in my car and drove until it died, and I ended up in your neighborhood, and you saved me. Emma met his eyes. But here's the part you need to know. My father's had me tracked since that night. His security team has been monitoring my location. They know I've been coming here. They know about you and Eli. Jack went very still. Why are you telling me this? Because my father called last night. Well, his security chief did. They want me to come home, and they're not subtle about threats. Emma's voice cracked. Jack, I don't know what he'll do. He's a powerful man with a lot of resources and absolutely no qualms about using them. I couldn't live with myself if you or Eli got caught in the crossfire of my family drama. For a long moment, Jack didn't say anything. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable, and Emma felt her heart breaking. This was it. This was where he told her to leave and never come back, that he had enough problems without adding a runaway heiress to the list. Emma Sullivan, Jack said finally, slowly, like he was testing the weight of the name. CEO, billionaire, running from an arranged marriage. He laughed, but it wasn't unkind. I gotta say, when you run away from your problems, you commit to it. I'm sorry. Emma's voice came out small. I should have told you sooner. It felt good to be just Emma for a while, to be treated like a person instead of an asset. Hey, Jack pushed off the desk and closed the distance between them. You are a person. Money and job titles don't change that. He touched her arm gently. But I'm not gonna lie, this is a lot. I know, and if you want me to leave, I understand. The last thing you need is my father's lawyers or security team showing up here, disrupting your business, threatening... Emma, Jack's voice was firm. Stop. Take a breath. She did, pulling air into lungs that felt too tight. I don't scare easy, Jack said. Had a wife die slowly over 2 years, quit a stable job to open a garage with no safety net. Raise a kid alone in a city that's expensive as hell. Your father might have money and power, but I've survived worse than rich men making threats. He doesn't make threats. He makes things happen. Then let him try. Jack's jaw set in a line Emma was beginning to recognize. Stubborn determination that wouldn't bend. You came here for help. I helped you. You came back with food and company and got grease under your fingernails learning about cars. You read frog books with my kid and made him laugh. That's real. That matters. And I'm not going to let some corporate shark scare me away from someone who's become, he paused, searching for the word, a friend, a good one. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. You might lose business. He could shut you down with code violations, zoning issues, a dozen different ways. He's done it before to people who got in his way. I've been barely hanging on since I opened this place. One more problem ain't gonna break me. Jack smiled slightly. Besides, I'm stubborn. Runs in the family. You've met Eli. Despite everything, Emma laughed wetly. He is pretty stubborn. Got it from his mom and doubled it from me. Kid's unstoppable when he decides something. Jack squeezed her arm once and let go. Point is, I'm not scared of your father. I'm more worried about you. What are you going to do? I don't know. Emma wiped her eyes roughly. I can't go back. Not to Christopher, not to that life. But I can't hide forever either. Eventually I'll have to face my father, deal with the company, figure out what the hell I want from the rest of my life. So do that. But do it on your terms, not his. Jack picked up one of the coffees, took a sip, and grimaced. God, that's terrible. Where'd you get this? The gas station on 5th. There's your first mistake. Never trust gas station coffee. He set it down. Come on, I'll make us some real coffee, and we'll figure this out. They spent the next hour in the office, drinking coffee that was only marginally better than the gas station version, eating pastries that Eli would have murdered them for starting without him. Jack listened as Emma talked through her options. None of them good, all of them complicated. She could go back to Sullivan Industries, resume her role as CEO, and try to navigate her father's expectations while maintaining some autonomy. She could resign entirely, walk away from the company and the money, and start over with nothing. She could fight, hire lawyers, contest the prenup, force a confrontation that would tear the family apart publicly. What do you want? Jack asked when she'd exhausted the possibilities. Honestly, I want to keep coming here. Bringing lunch, learning about transmissions, reading with Eli, living a life that feels real instead of performed. Emma stared into her coffee cup. But that's not realistic, is it? I can't just abandon everything because I'm scared and tired. Why not? Because I have responsibilities. 3,000 employees depending on the company's stability. Investors. Shareholders. A legacy my father spent 30 years building. That's what you're supposed to want, Jack said gently. I asked what you want. Emma opened her mouth to argue and found she couldn't. Because he was right. Everything she'd listed was obligation, expectation, duty. None of it was desire. I don't know what I want, she admitted finally. I've spent so long being who I'm supposed to be that I don't know who I actually am. Then maybe that's what you figure out first. Jack stood, stretching. The rest? Company, your father, Christopher. All that can wait while you answer the important question. Before Emma could respond, the sound of tires on gravel made them both freeze. Through the office window, she saw 3 black SUVs pulling into the garage parking lot with the casual authority of people who owned whatever space they occupied. Jack, Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I see them. His voice had gone flat, hard. Stay here. No, this is my problem, not yours. Emma stood, squaring her shoulders. I'll handle it. She walked out of the office and into the garage bay just as the SUV doors opened. 4 men in dark suits emerged, moving with the coordinated precision of professional security. And from the second vehicle, her father. William Sullivan was 63 years old and looked 50. Silver hair perfectly styled, suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, posture that radiated controlled power. He surveyed the garage with the expression of someone examining something distasteful but necessary. Emma, his voice carried across the space, cultured and cold. We need to talk. Emma felt Jack move to stand beside her, a quiet presence that steadied her shaking hands. Hello, Father. I see you decided to send an army instead of just calling. You weren't answering your phone. William's eyes flicked to Jack, dismissing him in an instant. Is there somewhere private we can speak? Anything you have to say, you can say here. Emma crossed her arms. This is Jack Turner. He owns this garage. Jack, my father, William Sullivan. Jack nodded, but didn't extend his hand. William didn't offer his. The air between them crackled with tension. Emma, don't be dramatic. William's voice held the edge it always got when he was losing patience. We both know this little rebellion has gone on long enough. You've made your point. Now it's time to come home, apologize to Christopher, and salvage what we can of this situation. I'm not coming home, and I'm definitely not apologizing to Christopher. Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. That engagement was over the moment I found the prenup. The prenup that protects both families' interests. William stepped forward, his security team flanking him. Emma, you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. The merger with Morrison Logistics is crucial for the company's future. Your future. My future? Emma laughed bitterly. Father, you sold my future like it was another asset. Christopher gets the company, you get market dominance, and I get to smile and pretend I chose any of this. You did choose it. When you accepted the position as CEO, you accepted the responsibilities that came with it. William's voice hardened, including making decisions that benefit the company, even when they're personally difficult. No, I accepted a job. I didn't accept selling my life. Emma took a step forward, and she felt Jack's hand brush her back. Barely there, just a reminder she wasn't alone. I'm done, Father. Done with the company if it means living like this. Done with Christopher. Done with you treating me like a chess piece. William's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, anger maybe, or fear of losing control. You don't mean that. You're upset, which is understandable, but I mean every word. Emma's voice rang clear. Find a new CEO. Merge with Morrison if you want, but leave me out of it. For a long moment, William just stared at her. Then his gaze shifted to Jack, and Emma saw calculation replace surprise. I see. This is about him. This has nothing to do with Jack, Emma said quickly. This is about me finally realizing I deserve better than what you've planned. Really? William's smile was sharp. Because from where I'm standing, my daughter runs away from her engagement and immediately attaches herself to the first man who shows her kindness. That's not growth, Emma. That's desperation. Emma felt the words like a slap, all the more painful because part of her feared they were true. But before she could respond, Jack spoke for the first time. Mr. Sullivan, with respect, your daughter's been coming here because she needed somewhere safe to figure out her life. That's all. We're friends. And friends don't judge each other for having the courage to walk away from situations that hurt them. William looked at Jack like he was noticing an insect. And you are? Jack Turner, owner of this garage, single father, guy who helped your daughter when she needed it. Jack's voice stayed level. That's really all you need to know about me. Oh, I know plenty about you, Mr. Turner. William pulled out his phone, tapped something, and held it up. John Henry Turner, 36 years old, widowed 3 years ago. One son, Eli, age 7. Former aerospace engineer at Lockheed Martin, left to open this garage which has been operating at a loss for the past 18 months. 2 months behind on commercial rent, $3,000 in outstanding medical bills from your son's recent hospital visits, and credit card debt approaching $15,000. Emma's stomach dropped. Jack's expression barely changed, but she saw his jaw tighten. Did your homework, Jack said quietly. I always do. William pocketed his phone. Here's what's going to happen. Emma will return home with me. You will forget she was ever here, and in exchange for your cooperation and discretion, I'm prepared to pay off your debts and provide a substantial financial cushion for your business. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and held it out. Emma could see the edge of a check. How much? Jack asked. $100,000. More than enough to stabilize your business and provide security for your son. Emma felt sick. Father, you can't just... It's a generous offer, Mr. Turner. William's voice was smooth now, confident. More than you'd make in a year from this garage. All you have to do is step back and let Emma return to her responsibilities. Jack looked at the envelope for a long moment. Emma held her breath, knowing what that money would mean to someone in his position. Not just help, but salvation. Security for Eli. Breathing room he desperately needed. Jack reached out and took the envelope. Emma's heart cracked. He opened it, pulled out the check, and looked at the amount. Then he tore it in half, and half again, and again, until the pieces fluttered to the oil-stained concrete like snow. "If that's what you think I'm worth," Jack said, his voice like granite, "then you can't afford me." William's expression darkened. "That's a foolish decision, Mr. Turner." "Maybe, but it's mine." Jack crossed his arms. "See, here's the thing about buying people. It only works if they're for sale. I'm not. My friendship with Emma isn't. And you coming in here with your security team and your checkbook thinking you can wave money around and get what you want? That's not how the world works, at least not my world." "Your world?" William's laugh was cold. "Look around, Mr. Turner. Your world is falling apart. This garage is a month from foreclosure. Your son deserves better than a father who's too proud to accept help when it's offered." "Dad?" The small voice came from the doorway to the office. Eli stood there in his SpongeBob pajamas. He'd spent the night at the garage because Jack couldn't afford another day of missed daycare. His eyes wide and frightened. "What's happening?" Jack's entire demeanor changed instantly, softening. "It's okay, buddy. Just some grown-up stuff. Go back inside, okay?" But Eli didn't move. He looked at Emma, then at the strange men in suits, then at his father. "Are they making you sad?" "No, son. I'm fine." Jack moved toward him, but Eli dodged around and went straight to Emma, grabbing her hand. "Miss Emma, are you leaving?" His voice was small, scared. "Because of them?" Emma crouched down, ignoring her father's presence, focusing only on the boy whose trust she'd somehow earned. "Eli, These men are trying to take you away, aren't they? Like how Mom got taken away." Tears welled in his eyes. "You promised you'd finish the airplane with me. You promised." Emma's throat closed. She'd forgotten. 3 days ago, she'd started helping Eli build a model airplane, one of those complex kits that took patience and steady hands. They'd only finished the fuselage before running out of time. "I remember," Emma whispered. "I remember my promise." "Then don't go." Eli's grip on her hand tightened. "Please don't go." William's voice cut through the moment like ice. "Emma, we're leaving. Now." But Emma stayed crouched, looking into Eli's frightened face, and something inside her crystallized. This child, this sweet, brilliant, stubborn boy who collected rocks and dreamed of stars, trusted her. His father had shown her kindness without agenda. They'd given her a glimpse of a life built on honesty and care instead of strategy and obligation. And her father wanted her to walk away from that because of optics, because of money, because of a company that had always mattered more than she did. "No," Emma said, standing slowly but keeping Eli's hand in hers. "I'm not leaving." "Excuse me?" "You heard me, Father. I'm not leaving." Emma faced him squarely, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. "You can threaten Jack's business. You can try to shut down the garage. You can do whatever you want with Sullivan Industries, but I'm done letting you control my life." William's face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake." "Probably, but it's my mistake to make." Emma felt Jack move to stand beside her, Eli between them, and it felt like something clicking into place. "I'm 29 years old, Father. I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn your approval, live up to your expectations, be the daughter and CEO you needed me to be. And I just realized I don't want to anymore. Emma, I quit." The words came out clear and final. "As CEO of Sullivan Industries, effective immediately, I resign. You can promote from within, hire externally, or run it yourself. I don't care anymore. But I'm out." The silence that followed was deafening. William stared at her like she'd grown a second head. His security team looked uncomfortable. Jack's hand found Emma's shoulder, steady and warm. "You can't quit," William said finally, his voice tight with controlled fury. "You have contracts, obligations, board meetings scheduled through next quarter. Then the board can meet without me. I'll have my lawyer handle the contracts." Emma felt light, almost dizzy with the enormity of what she'd just done. "I'm sorry if this disappoints you, Father. I'm sorry if it damages the company or your reputation or your plans with Christopher, but I'm not sorry for choosing myself for once." William's mouth thinned to a hard line. If you walk away now, you're walking away from everything. Your salary, your stock options, your inheritance, the apartment, the car, your expense accounts, all of it tied to your position with the company. I know. You'll have nothing, Emma. No job, no income, no support. She'll have friends, Jack said quietly. Sometimes that's more than enough. William turned his cold gaze on Jack. This isn't over, Mr. Turner. You've interfered with a business arrangement worth millions. I don't take that lightly. Wasn't a business arrangement, Jack replied calmly. Was a woman trying to escape a cage. I just happened to leave the door open. For a moment, Emma thought her father might actually lose his composure completely. His hands clenched at his sides, his jaw working. But then the mask slammed back into place, the controlled, calculating CEO who never let emotion show. Fine, William said coldly. You want to throw away everything your mother and I built? You want to choose poverty and irrelevance over position and power? That's your choice. But don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost. I won't be waiting. He turned on his heel and strode toward the SUVs, his security team scrambling to follow. Emma watched them go, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The SUVs pulled away in formation, disappearing around the corner, and only then did Emma realize she was shaking. Her legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the garage floor, Eli still clutching her hand. You okay? Jack crouched beside her. I just quit my job. Emma's voice came out breathless, shocked. I just walked away from everything. Oh God, Jack, what did I do? Something brave, he said simply. Something necessary. I have no money, no job, no plan. Emma felt hysteria bubbling up. I just made myself homeless and unemployed in the same conversation. You're not homeless. Jack pulled her to her feet, his hands steady on her arms. You've got a place to stay as long as you need it. Jack, I can't. Yes, you can. I've got a pull-out couch in the office. It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry, and you're welcome to it. His expression was serious, no hint of pity or judgment. You helped me when you didn't have to, spent time with Eli, made him laugh, made this place feel less lonely. Let me return the favor. Emma looked at him, at this man who'd torn up a $100,000 check because his integrity wasn't for sale, who was offering her shelter when he could barely afford his own rent. Why are you doing this? Because you need help, Jack said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. And because I like you. And because Eli would never forgive me if I let you leave without finishing that airplane. The airplane, Eli perked up, momentarily distracted from the drama. Can we work on it now? Buddy, maybe give Miss Emma a minute, Jack said gently. But Emma was already smiling through her tears. No, you know what? Let's build the airplane. I need to do something normal before I completely freak out about becoming unemployed. So that's what they did. While Jack returned to working on Mrs. Patterson's transmission, Emma and Eli sat in the office with glue and tiny parts and an instruction manual that might as well have been written in Sanskrit. They worked in companionable silence, Emma's hand steadying as she focused on the simple task of connecting pieces A and B. Miss Emma? Eli asked after a while. Are you sad? A little, Emma admitted, but also relieved. Does that make sense? Eli thought about it seriously. When Mom died, Dad said he was sad but also relieved because she wasn't hurting anymore. He said feelings can be two things at once. Your dad's a smart man. I know. Eli carefully applied glue to a wing section. Are you really going to stay here? With us? For a while, if your dad doesn't mind. Just until I figure things out. Good. He said it with such simple satisfaction that Emma's throat tightened. You fit here. Over the next few hours, reality began to sink in. Emma had no access to her bank accounts, all tied to Sullivan Industries, no credit cards that weren't corporate, no apartment that wasn't company-owned. She had the clothes on her back, her phone, and exactly $43 in the wallet she'd grabbed from the hotel room. She was, for the first time in her adult life, completely without resources. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. Hey, Jack said that evening after they'd closed the garage and were sharing takeout Chinese in the office. Eli had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from the day's excitement. You really okay? I know that was a lot. Emma picked at her low mane, thinking. My father spent my whole life teaching me that power comes from money and position, that without the company, without the Sullivan name carrying weight, I'd be nothing. She looked up at Jack. But I watched you tear up a check that could have solved all your problems because your principles mattered more. That's a different kind of power. One I want to learn. Principles don't pay the rent, Jack said, but he smiled slightly. No, but they let you sleep at night. That's worth something. Emma set down her food. Jack, I need you to know. I don't expect you to take care of me. I'll find work, figure out how to support myself. I just need time. Take all the time you need. He glanced at his sleeping son. Eli's already planning all the things he wants to show you. Kid's got a list. It includes his rock collection, every dinosaur he owns, and apparently a frog he found last week that I know nothing about. There's a frog? There's always a frog with this kid. He attracts amphibians. Jack's expression turned more serious. Emma, what your father said about my debts and the business struggling, all that's true. I can't offer you stability or comfort. This is barely a life I'm providing for my own kid, let alone anyone else. I don't need comfort. I need real. Emma reached across the space between them and took his hand, the first time she'd initiated that kind of contact. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. These past few days, sitting in this garage, eating cheap takeout, learning about oil filters, that's been more real than anything I've experienced in years. So thank you. For the couch, for the friendship, for not letting my father bully you. Jack's fingers closed around hers gently. You're welcome. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Scary as hell, but right. Ask me again in a week when I'm eating ramen for the third day straight. Hey, ramen's not that bad. Add an egg, some green onions, little sesame oil. That's a meal. Emma laughed, and it felt good. Real. Like maybe she could actually survive this. She slept that night on Jack's pull-out couch with a blanket that smelled like motor oil and Eli's stuffed dinosaur that he'd insisted she needed for protection from bad dreams. It wasn't the Egyptian cotton sheets of her penthouse, or even the decent mattress of the hotel. The springs poked her back and she could hear every car that passed on the street. But for the first time in months, Emma Sullivan slept without nightmares. The next morning, reality arrived in the form of a registered letter delivered to the garage. Emma signed for it with shaking hands, already knowing what it contained. The legal documents were thick and intimidating. Notice of termination from Sullivan Industries, cessation of benefits, revocation of access to company resources. Her father had worked quickly, severing every financial tie with surgical precision. Attached was a personal note in his precise handwriting. You made your choice. Live with it. Emma read it twice, waiting to feel devastated. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Bad news? Jack asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Official termination papers. My father's cut me off completely. Emma folded the letter carefully. So I guess it's really over. How do you feel? Free, Emma said, and realized she meant it. Terrified and free. That's a start. Jack jerked his head toward the garage bay. Come on. Mrs. Chen's dropping off her Civic this morning. Says it's making a noise like a dying whale. Want to help me figure out if she's exaggerating? She's not, Eli piped up from where he was eating cereal at the desk. Mr. Whiskers made the same sound last week before he coughed up a hairball. That's lovely imagery, buddy. Jack ruffled his hair. Eat your breakfast. Emma found herself smiling as she followed Jack into the garage. Her life had imploded spectacularly. She was broke, technically homeless, and had just burned every bridge to her former existence. But she was standing in a garage that smelled like honest work, about to diagnose a car's problems with a man who valued integrity over money, while his son compared engine noises to cat hairballs. For the first time in her life, Emma Sullivan had no idea what tomorrow would bring. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Mrs. Chen's Civic did indeed sound like a dying whale, and it took Emma and Jack 3 hours to trace the noise to a failing water pump. By the time they'd diagnosed the problem, Emma's hands were black with grease, and her back ached from bending over the engine compartment, but she felt more accomplished than she had closing any $1 million deal. You're getting good at this, Jack said, watching her wipe her hands on a rag that only spread the grease around. Couple more weeks, and I might actually be able to pay you." Emma laughed, but the comment lodged in her chest with uncomfortable weight. Money. She'd always had it, never thought about it, and now suddenly it was all she could think about. $43 wouldn't last long, and she couldn't keep living off Jack's charity indefinitely. "Jack," she said carefully as they cleaned up for lunch, "I need to find work, real work, something that pays." "I know." He didn't look at her, focusing instead on organizing his tools with methodical precision. "Been thinking about that. You got any skills besides running a billion-dollar company?" "I have an MBA from Wharton. I'm fluent in 3 languages. I can analyze supply chains, negotiate contracts, read financial statements." Emma heard how ridiculous it sounded. "Nothing useful for actual employment." "That's not true. Every business needs someone who understands numbers and logistics." Jack closed his toolbox. "Question is whether you're willing to start at the bottom." "I'm sleeping on your couch and wearing the same clothes 3 days in a row. I think my bottom starting credentials are solid." That earned a smile. "Fair point. There's a community center about 6 blocks from here. They run job training programs, help with resumes, that kind of thing. Sarah Martinez runs it. Good people. I'll introduce you." So that afternoon, while Eli was at school, his fever finally gone, energy restored to normal 7-year-old chaos levels, Jack drove Emma to the Riverside Community Center in his battered pickup. The building was squat and practical, its walls covered in cheerful murals that couldn't quite hide the underlying decay of the neighborhood. Sarah Martinez turned out to be a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a handshake that could crack walnuts. She listened to Emma's carefully edited story, left a corporate job, needed a fresh start, willing to do anything legal without judgment or excessive curiosity. "We get a lot of people making new beginnings," Sarah said, leading them through a hallway lined with bulletin boards, advertising GED classes, and food pantry hours. "Nobody here cares where you came from, just where you're trying to go." She set Emma up with the computer and job search resources, showed her how to build a resume that didn't scream overqualified and unemployable, and suggested starting with administrative positions or bookkeeping work. "You're articulate, professional, clearly educated," Sarah noted. "That'll help." "But Emma, I'm going to be straight with you. Without references from your previous employer, this is going to be harder than it should be." "I know." Emma stared at the blank resume template. "My father owns the company I just left. He's not going to give me a reference." "Then we work around it." Sarah pulled up a chair. "Tell me what you actually know how to do. Not the fancy MBA stuff, the practical skills." Emma thought about it. "I can organize systems. I'm good with people when I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I learn fast, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm just new to the kind that gets your hands dirty." "That's a start." Sarah began typing. "We'll build something honest. The rest will figure itself out." They worked for 2 hours, crafting a resume that was truthful without being detailed, emphasizing Emma's skills while de-emphasizing her background. When they finished, Emma had a document that presented her as a former business consultant looking to transition to hands-on work. Not exactly a lie, but not exactly the whole truth either. "I'll make some calls, Mike," Sarah promised as they left. "I know people who are always looking for reliable help. It won't be glamorous, but it'll be a paycheck." In the truck on the way back to the garage, Jack asked, "How you feeling?" "Like I'm 21 again, applying for internships and hoping someone takes a chance on me." Emma watched the neighborhood slide past the window. The same streets that had terrified her 2 weeks ago now felt almost familiar. Except worse, because at 21 I had my father's name backing me up. "You don't need his name. You've got your own skills." Jack turned onto their street. "And if it helps, I could use some help with the garage's books. Can't pay much, maybe $20 a week, but it's something." $20 a week to do bookkeeping for a mechanic shop? Emma felt her eyes sting with gratitude. "Jack, that's overpaying, probably. My books are a disaster, but Mrs. Chen's been after me to get organized. Says the IRS is going to come knocking if I don't sort out my receipts." He pulled into the garage lot. "So really, you'd be saving me from federal prison. Very heroic of you." Emma knew what he was doing, creating a job where none existed because he saw she needed one. The kindness of it made her chest ache. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." I know you can't afford to help me, but you're doing it anyway. Can't afford not to, Jack replied, killing the engine. You make Eli happy. Kid talks about you constantly. Miss Emma said this. Miss Emma taught me that. Emma. Worth way more than $20 a week to see him smile like that. They climbed out of the truck, and Emma was halfway to the garage when she noticed a man standing by the bay door. Expensive suit, polished shoes that had no business being in this neighborhood, a leather portfolio under one arm. He looked like he'd stepped out of her old life and into her new one, and Emma's stomach dropped. Miss Sullivan? The man's voice was smooth, professional. My name is Richard Hendricks. I'm an attorney representing Morrison Logistics. Jack moved closer to Emma, a protective instinct that would have been sweet if the situation wasn't suddenly terrifying. What do you want? Emma asked, trying to sound calm. Just to deliver this. Hendricks held out an envelope. Mr. Morrison has filed a breach of contract suit against you for backing out of the engagement. The wedding expenses alone total just over $2 million. And there's the matter of lost business opportunities resulting from the failed merger. Emma took the envelope with numb fingers. Christopher is suing me? Mr. Morrison's family is suing you, yes. The amount sought is $8 million, to be paid within 90 days or they'll pursue seizure of assets. Hendricks smiled without warmth. Of course, Mr. Morrison is willing to drop the suit entirely if you reconsider the engagement. So it's blackmail, Jack said flatly. It's a legitimate legal action resulting from breach of contract. Hendricks turned his cold gaze on Jack. And you might want to be careful about your involvement in this situation, Mr. Turner. Tortious interference is also actionable. Tortious what now? It means they could sue you too, Emma said, her voice hollow, for encouraging me to break the engagement. I didn't encourage anything. I just gave her a place to breathe. Jack's jaw was tight with anger. You people are unbelievable. We're thorough. Hendricks adjusted his portfolio. Miss Sullivan, you have 30 days to respond to the lawsuit. I'd suggest getting legal representation, though given your current financial situation, that may prove challenging. He handed her a business card. When you're ready to be reasonable, call me. Mr. Morrison is a patient man, but his family's patience has limits. He walked away, his shoes clicking on the pavement with the confident rhythm of someone who knew he held all the cards. Emma stared at the envelope, the weight of it impossible. $8 million. She didn't have 8,000, let alone 8 million. Her father had cut her off completely, and even if she wanted to fight this, lawyers cost money she no longer had. Emma. Jack's hand on her shoulder pulled her back from the edge of panic. Breathe. They're going to sue me for $8 million. Her voice came out high, thin. Jack, I can't. I don't have. I know. Come inside. He guided her into the garage, into the small office where she'd been sleeping on his couch, and made her sit. Talk to me. What exactly does this mean? Emma opened the envelope with shaking hands and scanned the legal documents. They were exactly as Hendricks had described. A lawsuit claiming breach of contract, demanding compensation for wedding expenses, lost business opportunities, and emotional distress. The numbers swam on the page, impossibly large. It means Christopher's family wants to punish me for walking away, Emma said numbly. They probably think I'll panic and come back, agree to the wedding just to make this go away. Will you? No. The word came out stronger than she felt. No, I won't. I can't. Even if it means bankruptcy or worse. Jack pulled up a chair and sat across from her. Okay. Then we figure out another way. There's always another way. Jack, this is $8 million. That's not a problem you solve by being optimistic. Emma felt hysteria bubbling up again. I'm broke. I have no assets, no income, no way to pay for a lawyer, let alone a settlement. They're going to bury me. Maybe. Or maybe they're bluffing. Jack took the papers from her hands, studying them with the careful attention he usually reserved for engine diagnostics. See, thing about rich people, they assume everyone's as motivated by money as they are. But you can't squeeze blood from a stone. You got nothing for them to take. They'll garnish any future wages, put liens on anything I ever own, make sure I can never have a normal financial life. so you'll have an abnormal financial life. Join the club. Jack set down the papers. Emma, I've been broke for 3 years. Still managed to keep my kid fed and a roof over our heads. It's not the end of the world. You don't understand. I understand that you're scared. That's fair. This is scary. His voice was patient, grounding. But you survived running away from your own engagement party. You survived your father showing up with an army and a $100,000 bribe. You can survive this too. Emma wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that courage and stubbornness were enough to overcome the reality of $8 million in legal threats. But she'd grown up in that world, knew how power and money crushed people who got in their way. I should leave, she said suddenly. Jack, this is only going to get worse. They mentioned suing you too, tortious interference. They're going to come after anyone connected to me. I can't let you and Eli get caught up in this. Little late for that. Jack's expression was stubborn. I tore up your father's check, remember? Pretty sure that ship sailed. This is different. This is a lawsuit, legal action. They could destroy your business, take everything. They could try. Jack stood, crossing to the small window that overlooked the garage bay. You know what my life was before you showed up? Work, worry about money, try to keep Eli happy, repeat. Same thing every day, just getting by. No end in sight. He turned back to her. Then you crashed into it with your torn wedding dress and bare feet, and suddenly we're having bagels for breakfast and building model airplanes and laughing. You made this place feel alive again. Jack, I'm not saying I'm in love with you. He held up a hand. That's not what this is about. What I'm saying is that you're my friend, Eli's friend, and friends don't run when things get hard. They stay and figure it out together. Emma felt tears slip down her cheeks. You barely know me. I know you're brave enough to walk away from everything you've ever known because it was wrong. I know you're patient enough to read about frogs with a 7-year-old. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes, and you're not afraid to get grease under your fingernails. Jack's smile was gentle. I know enough. Before Emma could respond, the sound of the garage door rolling up made them both freeze. Emma's first thought was that Hendricks had returned, or worse, her father, with more threats. But the voice that called out was younger, frightened. Dad! Dad! Help! They ran into the bay to find Eli stumbling through the door, his face flushed bright red, his breathing labored. He'd walked from school, a violation of every rule Jack had set, and he looked wrong in a way that made Emma's heart stop. Buddy, what? Jack caught his son as Eli's legs gave out. Jesus, you're burning up. Couldn't breathe, Eli gasped. Nurse said go home, but I didn't wanted to. His words dissolved into coughing, harsh and wet. Jack's face went white. Emma, call 911. Now. She already had her phone out, fingers shaking as she dialed. The operator's voice was calm and professional, asking questions Emma barely registered. How old is the patient? What are his symptoms? Is he conscious? Ambulance is coming, Emma said, kneeling beside where Jack held Eli on the concrete floor. 5 minutes, they said. 5 minutes. Jack's voice was hollow with fear. His hands moved over his son with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, feeling his forehead, watching the labored rise and fall of his small chest. Eli, buddy, look at me. Stay with me, okay? Just breathe. Trying, Eli wheezed. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. Emma had never felt more useless. She'd negotiated billion-dollar contracts, managed thousands of employees, made decisions that affected hundreds of families. But here, watching this child struggle to breathe, she had no skills that mattered, no power that could help. What can I do? She asked desperately. Talk to him. Keep him calm. Jack was moving on autopilot, the terror in his eyes barely contained. Eli, Miss Emma's here. Can you hear her? Hi, Eli, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. Remember that airplane we're building? I figured out the tricky part with the landing gear. Can't wait to show you. Eli's eyes found hers, and he managed a tiny nod. We're going to finish it together, okay? You, me, and your dad. It's going to be the best model airplane in the whole city. Emma kept talking, saying anything, everything, just to keep him focused on her voice instead of his failing lungs. The ambulance arrived in 3 minutes that felt like hours. Paramedics swarmed in with equipment and questions, and Jack answered while never letting go of Eli's hand. Emma stepped back, giving them room, and felt completely hollowed out watching them load the boy onto a stretcher. "Sir, are you riding with us?" one paramedic asked. "Yes, Emma." Jack looked at her and she saw everything he couldn't say. Fear, trust, please. "I'll lock up and meet you there," Emma said immediately. "Go, I've got this." Jack nodded once and climbed into the ambulance, and Emma watched it pull away with lights flashing and siren wailing, taking with it the two people who'd become her entire world in less than 2 weeks. The garage felt impossibly empty without them. Emma closed the bay door with shaking hands, locked up, and realized she didn't have a car. Jack had driven her everywhere. She pulled out her phone to call a taxi and stared at the number before remembering. She had $43. A taxi to the hospital would cost at least $20. She called anyway, praying they'd take a credit card, but the dispatcher said cash only. Emma stood in the empty parking lot and felt the weight of her choices crash down. She'd walked away from millions, from security, from the kind of power that could solve problems like, how do I get to the hospital? Now she was broke and stranded, and the child she'd come to love was fighting to breathe, and she couldn't even afford a taxi. "Screw it," she muttered, and started walking. The hospital was 4 miles away. Emma made it in 53 minutes, her feet blistered and aching, her lungs burning. She burst through the emergency room doors looking like someone who'd fought her way through a war zone and went straight to the desk. "Eli Turner," she gasped. 7 years old, brought in by ambulance, respiratory distress. "Are you family?" the clerk asked without looking up. Emma paused. She wasn't family. She was just someone who'd crashed into their lives 2 weeks ago. "I'm with his father, Jack Turner. Please, I need to know if he's okay." The clerk typed something, frowned at her screen. "Pediatric ICU, 3rd floor, but only families allowed in right now. Can you at least tell me if he's stable?" "Ma'am, I can't give out patient information to non-family members." Emma wanted to scream. She wanted to pull rank, demand answers, use the Sullivan name to get what she wanted. But that name didn't carry weight anymore. She was nobody. She found the waiting room and collapsed into a plastic chair, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and fear. Other people sat scattered around the space, a woman with a sleeping toddler, an elderly man staring at nothing, a teenager with headphones in. All of them waiting, all of them powerless. Emma had been powerless before, as a child watching her mother die, as a young woman trying to earn her father's approval, as a CEO trapped by expectations. But this was different. This was watching someone else's child fight for breath and knowing there was nothing she could do to help. She pulled out her phone and stared at the lawsuit papers she'd photographed earlier. $8 million. The number felt obscene now, ridiculous in the face of real crisis. What did money matter when a 7-year-old couldn't breathe? 2 hours passed. Then 3. Emma paced the waiting room, called the desk every 20 minutes for updates they wouldn't give her, and slowly came apart at the seams. At hour 4, Jack appeared. He looked destroyed, hair wild, face pale, eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and tears. Emma was on her feet before she consciously decided to move, crossing the space between them. "He's okay," Jack said before she could ask. "Pneumonia. Severe, but they caught it in time. He's on oxygen and antibiotics, sleeping now." His voice cracked. "They said if we'd waited another hour." Emma caught him as his legs buckled, and they stood there in the middle of the waiting room, she holding up a man twice her size, he finally letting himself fall apart after hours of staying strong for his son. "He's okay," Emma repeated over and over, like a mantra. "He's okay. You got him here in time. He's okay." When Jack could breathe again, when the worst of the terror had passed, they sat in those awful plastic chairs, and he told her everything. The infection that had been building for days, masked by what they thought was just a recurring fever. The fluid in Eli's lungs. The terrifying moment when his oxygen levels had dropped so low the monitors had started screaming. "They want to keep him for at least a week," Jack said, his voice hollow. "Maybe more. And the bills, Christ, Emma, I don't even want to know what this is going to cost. My insurance is bare minimum because that's all I could afford, and the ER alone is going to be thousands." "Don't worry about that now," Emma said, even though she knew he would. Knew he'd be calculating every hour, every treatment, every medication against money he didn't have. I can't not worry. This is going to bury me. The garage rent's already late, and now I'll have to close for however long he's here because I can't leave him. Jack put his head in his hands. Your father was right. Eli deserves better than this. Better than a dad who can't even afford to keep him healthy. Stop. Emma's voice was sharp. Jack, look at me. He did, and she saw the guilt there, crushing, overwhelming guilt that came from loving someone so much that every failure felt personal. Your son is alive because you recognized something was wrong and got him help immediately. He's going to recover because you've been taking care of him, teaching him, loving him every single day of his life. The money doesn't matter. You matter. And you're a great father. I can't even pay the hospital bills. Then we'll figure it out. Fundraisers, payment plans, medical debt forgiveness programs. There are options. Emma grabbed his hands, grease-stained and trembling. I've spent the last 4 hours researching on my phone because I couldn't help Eli, but I could help you. There are resources. We'll use every single one. Jack stared at her. Why? Because you're my friend. Because Eli matters to me. Because for the first time in my life, I'm part of something real, and I'm not going to let it fall apart because of money. Emma's voice strengthened with every word. You stood up to my father for me. Let me stand up to the universe for you. Something shifted in Jack's expression, the guilt receding slightly, replaced by exhausted gratitude. You walked here, didn't you? From the garage. How did you know? Your feet. He gestured at her shoes, which were definitely worse for wear. And because you're the kind of stubborn that won't let obstacles stop you. Learned from the best. Emma managed a small smile. Can I see him, Eli? They're strict about visiting hours, but Jack stood, pulling her up with him. Come on, I'll say you're his aunt. They probably won't question it. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor in silence, exhaustion settling over both of them like a weight. The pediatric ICU was quieter than Emma expected. Machines beeping, nurses moving with practiced efficiency, but an overall sense of careful calm. They were buzzed through after Jack spoke to someone at the desk, and he led her to a room at the end of the hall. Eli looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, IV in his arm, monitors tracking every heartbeat and breath. But his color was better, and his chest rose and fell with a steadier rhythm than it had in the garage. Hey, buddy, Jack said softly, moving to the bedside. Got a visitor. Eli's eyes fluttered open, heavy with medication, but alert enough to focus on Emma. Miss Emma, he mumbled. You came. Of course I came. Emma took his free hand carefully. Couldn't let you have all the fun without me. Not fun, needles. But he smiled slightly. Did you finish the landing gear? Not without you. We're a team, remember? Team, Eli agreed, his eyes already drifting closed again. Don't leave, okay? I'm not going anywhere, Emma promised, and meant it more than she'd meant anything. She stayed while Eli slept. Jack dozed in the chair beside the bed, and the machines counted heartbeats in the darkness. She stayed even when visiting hours officially ended and a kind nurse pretended not to notice her. She stayed because this child and his father had given her something precious, a glimpse of what family could be when it wasn't built on obligation and strategy. Around midnight, Jack woke with a start, disoriented. Emma touched his shoulder gently. He's okay, no changes. The nurse checked 15 minutes ago. Jack rubbed his face, looking at his sleeping son, then at Emma. You should go back to the garage. Get some sleep. I don't have keys or money for a taxi or anywhere else to go. Emma smiled slightly. So I guess I'm here until you kick me out. I'm not kicking you out. Then I'm staying. They sat in silence for a while, watching Eli breathe, counting it as the miracle it was. Finally, Jack said quietly, I'm sorry about the lawsuit, about dragging you into my mess right when you got hit with all that. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose to be here. Emma leaned back in her uncomfortable chair. And honestly, sitting here watching Eli sleep makes $8 million feel pretty meaningless. Christopher and his family can sue. My father can cut me off. None of it matters as much as this. This? Emma gestured at the room, at the boy in the bed, at the man beside her. This, real people, real problems, real love, this is what matters. Jack reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. Just held it, his grip warm and solid and present. Emma laced her fingers through his and felt something settle in her chest. Not romance exactly, though there were hints of that. Something deeper. The recognition that she'd found people worth staying for. They fell asleep like that, hands linked across the space between hospital chairs, two people who'd started as strangers and become something that didn't have an easy name. When Emma woke hours later to early morning light and the sound of Eli asking for breakfast, she opened her eyes to find Jack watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Morning," he said softly, not wanting to wake Eli, who drifted back to sleep after determining that hospital breakfast wasn't worth being awake for. "Morning," Emma stretched, her neck protesting the night in a chair. "How's he doing?" "Better. Nurse said his oxygen levels are improving. They might be able to take the tubes out this afternoon if he keeps progressing." Jack released her hand reluctantly, and Emma felt the loss of contact like cold. "Emma, we need to talk." Those 4 words never preceded anything good. Emma sat up straighter, bracing herself. "About yesterday, the lawsuit, my offer to let you stay. I need you to understand something." Jack leaned forward, elbows on knees, choosing his words carefully. "I meant what I said about being friends, about not abandoning you. But I can't be the reason you destroy your life. You're not—" "Let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "That lawyer was right. If you keep staying at the garage, if we keep being seen together, Christopher's family is going to use it against you. They'll say we were having an affair, that you left him for me. It'll make the lawsuit worse, give them ammunition." Emma's stomach sank, understanding where this was going. "And more than that," Jack continued, "I can't watch you throw away millions of dollars because you're trying to prove a point. Emma, you could settle with Christopher's family, go back to your father, resume your life. You'd be miserable, yeah, but you'd be secure. You wouldn't have to worry about money or lawsuits or sleeping on garage couches." "Is that what you want?" Emma's voice came out small. "For me to go back?" "No." The word was instant, vehement. "But what I want doesn't matter. What matters is what's best for you long term, and I'm not sure staying in my world is it." Emma stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the hospital parking lot. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and gray. Down below, people were arriving for early shifts, starting their ordinary days, living their ordinary lives. "Jack, can I tell you something?" She didn't wait for his answer. "My entire life, people have told me what's best for me. My father said Sullivan Industries was best. My board of directors said stability was best. Christopher said our marriage was best. Everyone had opinions about my life except me." She turned to face him. "You know what's different about you?" "What?" "You're the first person who's asked what I want instead of telling me what I should want." Emma crossed back to him, sitting in her chair and taking his hands in hers. "I don't want to go back, Jack. I don't want Christopher or my father's approval or a life built on lies. I want this messy, complicated, broke reality where things matter." "Emma, I'm not done." She squeezed his hands. "Yes, staying near you might complicate the lawsuit. Yes, I might end up bankrupt and struggling, but I'd rather struggle with people I care about than be comfortable and alone. You taught me that. The way you choose Eli over money every single time, the way you value integrity over survival, that's worth more than $8 million. Jack's eyes were bright with emotion he was trying to contain. "You say that now, but when you're eating ramen for the 3rd week straight, then we'll learn to make really good ramen." Emma smiled through her own tears. "Jack, I'm not some damsel who needs rescuing. I'm not going to fall apart without money or security. I'm stronger than that. And more importantly, I want to be the kind of person who makes choices based on what's right, not what's easy." "You're going to make me cry in front of my kid," Jack said roughly, wiping his eyes. "That's embarrassing." "Good. Shows you're human." Emma glanced at Eli, still sleeping peacefully. "Besides, I made him a promise. We're finishing that airplane together. All 3 of us." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their conversation settling. Finally, Jack said, If you're really staying, if you're really sure, then we do this right. We get you a lawyer, even if it's a public defender. We fight the lawsuit properly instead of just hoping it goes away. And we figure out a real plan for your future that doesn't involve living on my couch indefinitely. Deal. Emma felt lighter than she had since Hendricks had shown up with his envelope full of threats. And Jack? Thank you for giving me a choice instead of making it for me. Yeah, well, seemed only fair after you gave me one. He stood, stretching. I'm going to get coffee from the cafeteria. You want anything? Whatever's cheapest. I'm buying. Jack laughed at that, and the sound chased away some of the heaviness that had settled over the past 24 hours. He left, and Emma found herself alone with Eli, watching him sleep and thinking about futures that didn't involve corporate empires or arranged marriages. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Martinez at the community center. Got you an interview tomorrow, 2 p.m., administrative position at a nonprofit, 18-hour to start. Interested? Emma stared at the message. $18 an hour. Her old salary had been $18,000 an hour, roughly. This would be less than she'd spend on a single business lunch in her previous life. She typed back, very interested. Thank you. Because this was what starting over looked like. Taking jobs that paid barely enough to survive, fighting lawsuits you couldn't afford to fight, sleeping in hospital chairs because someone you cared about needed you there. It wasn't glamorous or comfortable or secure, but it was real. And finally, Emma Sullivan was ready for real. When Jack returned with coffee, Emma told him about the interview. He grinned so wide she thought his face might crack. That's great. See, things are already looking up. Jack, it's $18 an hour. It's a start. That's all that matters. He handed her a cup. And hey, with my $20 a week for bookkeeping, you'll be pulling in almost $800 a month. That's enough for a room somewhere, food, basics. Well, Emma did the math in her head. $800 a month wouldn't even cover her old coffee budget. But Jack was right. It was a start. Besides, he added, his expression turning sly, once you're gainfully employed, you can buy your own bagels. I'm getting tired of funding your breakfast habits. You haven't funded anything. I bought all those bagels. Details. He settled back into his chair, coffee in hand, watching his son sleep. Point is, we're going to figure this out. All of it. The lawsuit, the medical bills, your new life. One day at a time. One day at a time, Emma echoed, and it felt like a promise. Over the next week, reality proved both harder and easier than expected. Eli improved steadily, moving from ICU to regular pediatric ward, his energy returning in bursts that had the nurses laughing and slightly terrorized. Emma attended her interview and got the job. Administrative assistant at a homeless services nonprofit, answering phones and managing schedules for $18 an hour. It was humbling and exhausting and the most satisfaction she'd felt from work in years. Jack kept the garage running with help from Mrs. Chen, who turned out to be surprisingly capable with basic repairs. Emma worked mornings at the nonprofit and afternoons at the garage, organizing Jack's catastrophic filing system and discovering he owed the IRS significantly more than she'd anticipated. The hospital bills arrived, a stack of papers totaling $47,000, even after insurance. Jack went pale when he opened them, and Emma watched him age 10 years in 10 seconds. We'll figure it out, she said firmly, and spent that entire night researching medical debt forgiveness programs, charity care applications, and payment plan options. The lawsuit from Christopher's family moved forward. Emma met with a legal aid attorney who was honest about their chances. Not good, but not hopeless if they could prove the engagement was coerced and the contract unenforceable. It would take time and energy and more luck than they had any right to expect. And through it all, Emma discovered something surprising. She was happy, not comfortable or secure or free from worry, but happy in a way that came from earning her own money, making her own choices, building relationships that weren't transactional. On Eli's 8th day in the hospital, the doctors cleared him for discharge. Jack cried when they got the news, and Eli rolled his eyes with the exasperation of a 7-year-old who didn't understand why adults got so emotional about everything. They brought him home to the small apartment above the garage, Emma's first time seeing where Jack and Eli actually lived. It was tiny, maybe 600 square feet, with a living room that doubled as Jack's bedroom, and Eli's room barely big enough for a twin bed and dresser. but it was clean and filled with love, the walls covered in Eli's drawings and photographs of better days. "Welcome to the castle," Jack said dryly, watching Emma take it in. "It's perfect," Emma said, and meant it. That night, they finished the model airplane together, all three of them crowded around the kitchen table, following instructions and laughing when pieces didn't fit quite right. When they finally snapped the last piece into place, Eli held it up triumphantly. "We did it!" "We did," Emma agreed, feeling her chest tighten with emotion. "It's ours," Eli said seriously. "The three of us made it together. That means it belongs to all of us." He set the airplane carefully on the windowsill, where morning light would catch its wings. And looking at it there, this small, perfect thing they'd built together from pieces that hadn't made sense separately. Emma understood what she'd found. Not romance, though there were possibilities there. Not salvation, though they'd saved each other in different ways. Family. The kind built by choice instead of blood, by showing up instead of obligation, by staying through the hard parts because love wasn't convenient, it was necessary. Emma Sullivan had lost millions. She'd lost security and status and the life she'd been groomed to live, but she'd gained something infinitely more valuable. People who saw her, accepted her, and chose her anyway. And for the first time in 32 years, that was enough. The weeks that followed Eli's homecoming settled into a rhythm that Emma had never experienced before, one built on necessity and choice in equal measure. She woke at 6 in the cramped apartment, careful not to disturb Eli sleeping in his room, or Jack on the pull-out couch he'd insisted she take while he made do with the sleeping bag on the floor. She'd protested, but he'd simply said, "My house, my rules," with that stubborn set to his jaw she'd learned meant the argument was over before it started. Her mornings at the nonprofit were education in humility and purpose. She answered calls from people in crisis, scheduled intake appointments, and slowly learned that her MBA and years of corporate experience translated surprisingly well to managing chaos with limited resources. Her supervisor, a woman named Teresa who'd worked in social services for 20 years, told her after the first week, "You're good at this. You see systems where other people see problems. We could use that." It was the first compliment Emma had received in her new life that felt earned rather than obligatory, and she'd gone home that night feeling taller. Afternoon she spent at the garage where Jack's filing system, or lack thereof, was slowly transforming into something that might survive an IRS audit. She discovered he'd been overpaying on parts for years because he didn't track vendor pricing, that he frequently forgot to charge for labor hours, and that his customer loyalty was built partially on competence but mostly on the fact that he was chronically undercharging. "Jack, you billed Mrs. Patterson $40 for a transmission repair that should have been at least $300, Emma said one afternoon, holding up an invoice that made her want to cry. "She's on a fixed income," Jack replied from under a Honda, his voice muffled. "Can't squeeze blood from a stone. You can't run a business on charity. Can't run a life without compassion either." He rolled out, grease-smudged and unrepentant. "Besides, she always brings Eli cookies. That's worth at least $260. Emma wanted to argue, but she'd already learned that Jack's economics operated on a completely different system than anything she'd been taught at Wharton. People mattered more than profit margins. Kindness was its own currency, and somehow, despite barely breaking even month after month, the garage survived. What Emma couldn't figure out was how to make it thrive. The medical bills loomed like storm clouds, $47,000 that Jack approached with a strange combination of denial and determination. He'd applied for the charity care programs Emma had researched, but the hospital's financial counselor had been blunt. Jack made just enough to disqualify for full forgiveness, but nowhere near enough to actually pay. They'd agreed to a payment plan of $300 a month, which would take 13 years to clear the debt and keep Jack perpetually one emergency away from financial collapse. "It's fine," Jack said when Emma tried to discuss it. "I've been one emergency away from collapse since I opened this place. This is just a bigger emergency." "Jack, this isn't sustainable." "Neither is breathing, technically. We all stop eventually." He must have seen her expression because he softened, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "Emma, I appreciate you worrying, but I've been poor before. I'll be poor again. As long as Eli's healthy and fed and safe, the rest is just numbers." But Emma couldn't think of them as just numbers. She'd spent too many years understanding that numbers represented real consequences, missed opportunities, mounting stress, futures constrained by present limitations. She lay awake nights on Jack's couch, listening to his breathing from the floor, and tried to solve an equation that seemed impossible: how to save a man who refused to prioritize saving himself. The answer came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after Eli came home, Emma was organizing receipts at the garage when a woman in her 60s walked in, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body had betrayed them in small ways. She wore a business suit that had been expensive once, sensible shoes, and an expression that mixed determination with embarrassment. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, standing. "I'm looking for Jack Turner." The woman's voice was cultured, educated. "I was told he owns this establishment." Jack emerged from the bay, wiping his hands. "That's me. What can I do for you?" "My name is Margaret Hartley. I believe you knew my daughter, Rebecca Hartley?" The rag fell from Jack's hands. Emma watched the color drain from his face. "Rebecca from Lockheed Martin," he said quietly. "We worked together before I left. She speaks very highly of you. Says you were the most talented engineer in your division." Margaret's smile was sad. "She also mentioned you'd left to open a garage after your wife passed. I wanted to come see it for myself." Jack looked like he wanted to bolt. "It's not much, but it's honest work." "I can see that." Margaret glanced around the garage with the assessing eye of someone who understood business. "May I speak frankly, Mr. Turner?" "Usually how I prefer it." "My late husband and I built a manufacturing company from nothing. When he died 2 years ago, I sold it for considerably more than nothing. I've spent the time since looking for ways to invest in people who remind me of how we started, with skill, integrity, and more determination than capital." She pulled an envelope from her purse. "Rebecca suggested I consider you." Jack's jaw tightened. "If this is charity—" "It's not. It's business." Margaret handed him the envelope. "Inside you'll find a proposal. I'd like to invest in expanding Turner's Auto Repair. New equipment, improved facility, marketing to reach beyond just this neighborhood. In exchange, I'd take a 30% stake in the business and a seat on your advisory board." Emma felt her heart start to race. This was the answer she'd been looking for: capital without debt, expertise without control. But Jack was already shaking his head. "I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Hartley, but I'm not looking for investors." "Why not?" "Because investors want returns, growth, profit margins that make sense on paper. I run this place on gut feeling and prayer. That's not a foundation for expansion." "On the contrary, that's exactly the foundation I'm looking for." Margaret's expression was patient. "Mr. Turner, I've watched dozens of small businesses fail because they prioritized profit over people. You do the opposite, and somehow you're still here 3 years later. That suggests you understand something about sustainability that most MBAs miss." She gestured at Emma, "including, I suspect, the young woman standing next to you who's doing mental calculations about cash flow and ROI. Emma flushed, caught. "My daughter told me about your wife," Margaret continued, her voice gentling. "She said you left Lockheed Martin because you couldn't be the father Eli needed while working 60-hour weeks. That you chose your son over your career without hesitation. That's the kind of character I want to invest in." Jack picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "And if I say no?" "Then I'll respect your decision and leave. But Mr. Turner, consider this. You're good at what you do. You could be helping more people, employing others, building something that provides security for your son's future." Is refusing help really about independence, or is it about fear? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Emma watched Jack struggle with them, saw the moment they hit home. "Can I think about it?" he asked finally. "Take all the time you need. My contact information is in the envelope." Margaret turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Turner? Rebecca mentioned you might need assistance with some recent medical expenses. If you decide to accept my investment proposal, consider the first disbursement a signing bonus. No strings, no repayment required." She left, the door chiming behind her, and Jack stood holding the envelope like it might explode. "Jack," Emma started. "Don't." He set the envelope on the workbench without opening it. "I need to think." He retreated to the bay, sliding under a car with the single-minded focus of someone avoiding a conversation. Emma understood. She'd spent enough of her life running from decisions that felt too big to make, but this time she couldn't let him run. She waited until closing, after the last customer had left, and Eli was occupied with homework in the office. Then she cornered Jack by the tool chest and said, "We need to talk about the offer." Emma, "No, listen, I know you're scared. I know accepting help feels like losing control or admitting weakness or whatever story you're telling yourself. But Jack, this is Eli's future we're talking about. Medical bills that'll take 13 years to pay off. A business that barely survives month to month. You can't keep sacrificing everything on the altar of independence." "You don't understand," Jack said, his voice tight. "Then explain it to me." He was quiet for a long moment, organizing tools that didn't need organizing. Finally, without looking at her, he said, "When Sarah was dying, people kept offering to help. Her parents wanted to pay for experimental treatments. My parents wanted us to move back to Ohio where they could help with Eli. Friends offered money, time, prayers, everything." His hands stilled. "And I took none of it. I kept saying we'd manage, that I had it under control, that I could handle my wife dying and my 4-year-old falling apart and working full-time to pay medical bills." Emma's throat tightened, understanding beginning to dawn. "She died anyway," Jack continued, his voice cracking. "And I spent the next year wondering if I'd been too proud to accept help that might have given us more time. If my need to prove I could handle everything cost me even one more day with her." "Jack, that's not—" "I know it's not rational. I know no amount of money or help would have cured stage 4 cancer. But Emma, I failed her. I failed to save her, failed to make her last months easier, failed at everything that mattered." He finally looked up, and his eyes were wet. "So yeah, I'm scared to accept help. Because what if I fail again? What if I take Margaret's money and the garage collapses anyway? What if I make the wrong choice and hurt Eli instead of helping him?" Emma crossed the space between them and took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "You didn't fail, Sarah. Cancer failed. Medicine failed. But you? You stayed. You loved her until the end. You kept your son safe and whole through the worst thing that can happen to a family. That's not failure, Jack. That's heroism." "Doesn't feel heroic." "It never does to the person doing it." Emma's thumbs brushed away tears he probably didn't know he was crying. "But here's what I know. Margaret Hartley isn't offering charity. She's offering partnership, a chance to build something bigger than survival. And yes, it's scary. Yes, you might fail, but you might also succeed in ways you can't imagine. What if I make it worse? Then we'll figure it out together. You, me, Eli, we're a team now, remember? You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Jack closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. They stood like that for a long moment, in a garage that smelled of oil and possibility, while the weight of the past slowly loosened its grip. "Okay," Jack whispered finally. "Okay. I'll at least read the proposal. That's all I'm asking." They read it together that evening after Eli had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet except for the city sounds filtering through thin walls. Margaret's offer was generous, $200,000 for 30% equity, with clearly defined roles and expectations. She'd provide business expertise and connections, but daily operations would remain Jack's domain. The signing bonus she'd mentioned was $50,000, enough to clear the medical debt entirely with money left over for equipment upgrades. "This is too good," Jack said, reading the terms for the third time. "Nobody gives away this kind of money without expecting something in return. She's not giving it away. She's investing." Emma pointed to a clause near the end. "See? If the business fails within 5 years, you owe nothing. But if it succeeds, she gets returns on her investment. It's smart business, not charity." "You think I should accept?" "I think you should consider it seriously. Talk to a lawyer, make sure everything's legitimate. But Jack, this could change everything. For you, for Eli, for the garage." "For you too," Jack said quietly. "If the business expands, I could actually pay you a real wage for the bookkeeping. Maybe even hire you full-time to manage operations." Emma hadn't let herself think that far ahead, but the possibility bloomed warm in her chest. A real job at a business she believed in, working alongside people she cared about. It was so far from the corner office at Sullivan Industries that it seemed like a different life entirely. It was.
One thing at a time, Emma said. First, you decide about Margaret's offer. The rest will follow. Jack decided 3 days later, after consulting with a lawyer Sarah Martinez connected him with, after talking it through with Eli, who said, "Do it, Dad," with 7-year-old certainty, and after one more long night of Emma patiently dismantling every fear-based argument he constructed. He called Margaret Hartley and said yes. The transformation that followed was gradual but profound. Margaret brought in a business consultant who helped restructure operations without losing the personal touch that made Turner's special. They upgraded equipment, expanded the bay to handle more vehicles, and implemented a pricing structure that was fair to both customers and Jack's bottom line. Emma transitioned from the nonprofit to full-time work at the garage, managing everything from scheduling to vendor relations to the small team of mechanics Jack hired as business grew. Her title was officially Operations Manager, but really she was the glue holding together a growing business while Jack focused on what he did best, fixing cars and building relationships with customers. It wasn't glamorous. Emma traded her designer suits for work clothes that inevitably got stained with grease. Her new salary was a fraction of what she'd made at Sullivan Industries. She worked longer hours for less money and went home exhausted most nights. She'd never been happier. But the lawsuit still loomed like a shadow over everything good they were building. Christopher's lawyers had been relentless, filing motion after motion, clearly trying to intimidate Emma into settling. Her legal aid attorney, an exhausted public defender named David Chen, was doing his best with limited resources, but they both knew the odds were against them. "They're offering a settlement," David told her during a meeting 6 weeks after Margaret's investment. $500,000 payable over 10 years. It's a terrible deal, but it's better than the $8 million they're asking for in court. "I don't have $500,000. Emma looked at the paperwork, the numbers swimming on the page. "I barely have $5,000. "I know, but if we lose at trial, they could get a judgment that follows you for the rest of your life. This at least caps the damage." Emma thought about it. A decade of payments, $500,000 she didn't have, all to make Christopher's wounded ego go away. It felt like letting them win, like admitting she'd been wrong to choose herself. "No," she said. "No settlement. We fight." David looked simultaneously impressed and terrified. "Emma, you understand that fighting means trial? That means discovery, depositions, Christopher's lawyers digging into every aspect of your life for the past 6 months? Let them dig." Emma's voice was steady. "They're going to find out I left a billion-dollar company to work in a garage, that I'm broke and happy and don't regret a single choice. If that's what ends up in court records, I'm okay with it." "The judge might not see it that way." "Then we make them see it that way. We show that the engagement was coerced, that the prenup was designed to steal the company my mother helped build, that I had every right to walk away." Emma leaned forward. "David, I'm not paying $500,000 for the crime of choosing my own life." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. "Okay then, we fight." The trial date was set for 3 months away. Emma spent that time preparing, gathering evidence, documenting her father's controlling behavior, building a case that the engagement had been a business arrangement dressed up as romance. It meant confronting painful memories, admitting to strangers how thoroughly her life had been controlled. But it also meant taking back her narrative. Jack supported her through all of it, listening to her practice testimony at night, offering perspective when she got lost in legal minutiae, reminding her why the fight mattered. Eli, with the pure moral clarity of childhood, declared that bad people who make Miss Emma sad should go to jail, which wasn't legally sound but was emotionally satisfying. And slowly, Emma began to notice something shifting in her relationship with Jack. The casual touches that had always been friendly started to linger. The way he looked at her sometimes held weight that hadn't been there before. The careful distance they'd both maintained, aware of the optics, the lawsuit, the complexity, was narrowing. Neither of them acknowledged it. There were too many other urgent things demanding attention, but Emma felt it humming between them like electricity, waiting. 2 weeks before the trial, Emma's father showed up at the garage unannounced. She was in the office working on inventory when Jack appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Emma, your father's here. Wants to talk to you." Her stomach dropped.
Did he say what about? No, but he came alone, no security team, no lawyers, just him. Jack's jaw was tight. You want me to tell him to leave? Emma took a breath, steadying herself. No, I'll talk to him, but stay close, okay? Not going anywhere. William Sullivan looked older than he had 6 weeks ago. The silver in his hair seemed more pronounced, the lines around his eyes deeper. He stood in the garage bay looking profoundly out of place in his $1,000 suit, studying the improvements Margaret's money had funded. Emma, he said when she approached, you look well. I am well. She crossed her arms, protective. What do you want, Father? To talk. Away from lawyers and lawsuits and everything that's gotten between us. His voice was tired in a way she'd never heard. Can you spare 20 minutes? Emma almost said no. Almost told him he'd forfeited the right to casual conversations when he'd cut her off and sicked Christopher's lawyers on her. But something in his face stopped her. A vulnerability she'd never seen in William Sullivan. 20 minutes, she agreed. There's a diner down the street. They walked in silence, Emma hyper-aware of the way people's eyes followed her father, his suit, his bearing, his obvious wealth marking him as foreign to this neighborhood. She wondered if this was how she'd looked that first night, stumbling through streets in a torn wedding dress, out of place and desperately lost. Rosie's diner was quiet at 3 p.m., the lunch rush over and dinner still hours away. Rosie herself looked up as they entered, her eyes widening when she recognized Emma, then narrowing with suspicion when she saw William. Everything okay, honey? Rosie asked, the universal signal of women looking out for women. I'm fine, Rosie. Just coffee and pie for 2 if you have it. Emma slid into a booth, and her father sat across from her with the careful movements of someone entering enemy territory. Rosie brought coffee and 2 slices of apple pie, giving William one more suspicious look before retreating. William added cream to his coffee with the same precise movements Emma remembered from childhood. Everything controlled, nothing wasted. This is where you've been eating, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Sometimes, when I can afford it. Emma took a sip of coffee, waiting. You didn't come here to discuss my dining habits. No. William set down his cup with a soft clink. I came to apologize. Emma nearly choked. I'm sorry. What? An apology. I'm told it's what decent people offer when they've treated someone badly. His smile was self-deprecating, unfamiliar. I've spent 6 weeks telling myself you'd come to your senses, that you'd realize walking away from Sullivan Industries was a mistake, that you'd come home and we'd repair things. But you haven't. You've built a life here, and from what I've observed, you seem genuinely happy. I am happy. I can see that, which is what prompted some reflection on my part. William pushed his untouched pie around his plate. When your mother died, I channeled everything into the company. All my grief, my fear, my love. I poured it into building something that would last, something you could inherit and be proud of. I know that, Father. I've always known. What you don't know is that I forgot to channel any of that love into you directly. I thought providing for you, giving you opportunities, grooming you for leadership, I thought that was love. That was how I could show you that you mattered. His voice cracked slightly. But all I really did was build another cage, one with better bars than most people get, but still a cage. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. So, why didn't you let me go when I asked? Why the lawyers and the threats and cutting me off completely? Because I was terrified. The admission seemed to cost him. Emma, you're all I have. The company, the legacy, the carefully constructed world, none of it means anything without you. And when you left, when you chose poverty and uncertainty over everything I'd built, I took it personally, as rejection of me rather than rejection of a life that wasn't working for you. It was both, Emma said quietly. I do reject the life you planned for me, but Father, I never rejected you. I just needed you to see me as more than an extension of the company. I see that now. Too late, perhaps, but I see it. William finally met her eyes directly. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not here to negotiate or manipulate. I'm here because my daughter deserves an apology she should have received weeks ago. They sat in silence,
the weight of decades of misunderstanding settling between them. Emma thought about all the times she'd wanted exactly this, for her father to see her, really see her, as more than a business asset. The bitter irony was that it had taken her walking away completely for him to finally look. "I appreciate the apology," Emma said finally, "but it doesn't change anything. I'm not coming back to Sullivan Industries. I'm not marrying Christopher. I'm building a life here that makes sense to me." "I understand, and for what it's worth, I've already contacted the Morrison family's attorneys. I'm withdrawing my support for their lawsuit. Without my backing, they'll likely drop it. The merger is dead anyway. Christopher's already engaged to someone else, apparently." Emma felt something loosen in her chest. "You're serious?" "Completely. Consider it part of my apology, ensuring you can move forward without legal threats hanging over you."
William pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I'm also returning these. They belong to you." Emma opened the envelope and found stock certificates, her shares in Sullivan Industries, the ones that had been tied to her employment. "Father, I can't accept these." "They're yours. They were always meant to be yours. What you do with them is your choice, but they're not contingent on anything. Not your employment, not your relationship with me, nothing." He stood, leaving cash on the table for the coffee and pie. "I should go, but Emma, if you ever want to talk, not about the company, just to talk, my door is open." He left, and Emma sat alone in the booth, holding stock certificates worth several $1,000,000 and feeling like the world had tilted sideways. Her father had apologized, had let her go, had given her back financial security without strings attached. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she mostly felt sad, for all the years they'd missed understanding each other, for the relationship that might have been if he'd learned these lessons sooner. "He gone?" Rosie appeared at her elbow, coffee pot in hand. "Yeah, he's gone." "Good. Didn't like the look of him." Rosie refilled Emma's cup without asking. "Though I gotta say, anyone who leaves enough cash to cover your tab for the next month can't be all bad." Emma looked at the bills on the table, far more than the coffee and pie cost. A typical William Sullivan gesture, solving problems with money even as he claimed to have learned different lessons. She left the diner and walked back to the garage in a daze, the stock certificates heavy in her pocket. Jack was in the bay when she arrived, and he took one look at her face and wiped his hands. What happened? Emma told him everything, the apology, the lawsuit being dropped, the stock certificates. Jack listened without interrupting, his expression cycling through surprise, relief, and something else she couldn't identify. "So you're off the hook," he said when she finished. "No more legal threats, and you've got your safety net back." "I guess so." "That's good. That's really good, Emma." But his voice was flat, and he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. "Jack, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. This is great news. You can stop worrying about the lawsuit, can maybe even find a better job than managing a garage in a rough neighborhood." "Is that what you think I want?" Emma's voice rose. "You think now that I have money again, I'm going to leave?" "I think you have options now, that's all." Jack turned back to the car he'd been working on, but his movements were too precise, too controlled. "And options are good. You should have them." Emma felt frustration surge through her. "Jack Turner, look at me." He did reluctantly, and she saw the fear there, the same fear that had made him refuse Margaret's investment, the same fear that kept him from accepting help even when he desperately needed it, fear that he wasn't enough, that anyone who had the choice would choose something else. "I spent my entire life having every choice made for me," Emma said, closing the distance between them. "Where to go to school, what to study, who to work for, who to marry. And you know what all those choices got me? Miserable and lost and running through the rain in a torn wedding dress." "Emma, then I met you, and for the first time I got to choose. I chose to come back to this garage. I chose to stay even when my father threatened you. I chose to build a life here because this is where I want to be." She took his grease-stained hands in hers. "Having money again doesn't change that. Having options doesn't change that. You know why? Because you're not the default option I'm settling for. You're the choice I'm making." Jack's eyes were bright with emotion. "You say that now, but I'll say it tomorrow too. And next week. And next month. And however long it takes for you to believe it." Emma squeezed his hands. "Jack, I'm not Sarah. I'm not going to leave you by dying. I'm not your parents who you think you disappointed by making different choices. I'm just Emma, and I'm choosing to be here because here is where I want to be. Even though you could have anything, his voice was rough. I have everything. I have work that matters, people I care about, a life that feels real. The stock certificates are just paper. This, she gestured at the garage, at him, at the life they'd built together. Goeki. This is what has value. Jack pulled her into his arms then, burying his face in her hair, and Emma felt him shaking. They stood like that for a long time, among the cars and tools and honest work, while something that had been carefully maintained distance finally collapsed into something real. I think I'm falling in love with you, Jack whispered against her hair. And that terrifies me. I'm already in love with you, Emma whispered back. And it's the least terrifying thing I've done in months. He pulled back enough to see her face, his expression wondering. Yeah? Yeah. Emma smiled, feeling lighter than air. Turns out running away from a wedding is the best decision I ever made. Glad I could help with that. Jack was grinning now, the fear receding, replaced by something that looked like hope. So what happens now? Now we figure out the rest together. You, me, Eli, this garage, whatever comes next. That's a terrible plan. It's the only plan I've got. Emma pulled him down and kissed him. And it was everything a first kiss should be, clumsy and perfect, tasting of coffee and grease and possibility. They were still figuring out the mechanics of kissing while both grinning like idiots when Eli's voice echoed through the garage. Miss Emma! Dad, I finished my homework and, oh gross, you're kissing. They broke apart, laughing, as Eli stood in the office doorway making exaggerated gagging noises. Sorry, buddy, Jack said, not sounding sorry at all. Sometimes grown-ups do gross stuff. But why? Eli looked genuinely disturbed. That's where germs live. I'll explain when you're older. That's what you always say when you don't want to explain things. Eli considered them both seriously. Does this mean Miss Emma is staying forever? Because Billy at school says when parents kiss people, those people become new parents. Jack and Emma exchanged glances, neither quite ready to have that conversation with a 7-year-old. How about we start with staying for now and see what happens, Emma suggested. Okay, Eli brightened. Can we get pizza to celebrate you kissing? Mrs. Chen says important stuff deserves pizza. Mrs. Chen is wise, Jack agreed. Yeah, buddy, we can get pizza. They ordered from the place down the street and ate in the apartment, Eli chattering about his day while Jack and Emma kept stealing glances at each other like teenagers discovering feelings for the first time. It was domestic and simple and perfect. Later, after Eli had gone to bed and they were cleaning up, Jack said quietly, "The stock certificates your father gave you. What are you going to do with them?" Emma had been thinking about that all evening. "I want to sell some. Enough to pay off your medical debts completely, put money aside for Eli's future, and maybe invest more in the garage. The rest I'll keep as security, but I'm thinking of eventually donating it. There are a lot of causes that could use that money more than I need it. Emma, you don't have to pay my debts. That's not your responsibility." "No, but I want to. Not because you need me to, but because I can and it would make our lives easier. Let me do this, Jack. Let me choose to help the way you chose to help me." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but we're putting something in writing. Call it a loan if it makes you feel better about me accepting." "Deal." Emma pulled him close. "See? We're getting better at this whole accepting help thing." "Speak for yourself. I'm still terrible at it." "Lucky for you, I'm patient." The trial date came and went, rendered unnecessary when the Morrison family formally dropped their lawsuit. Emma received a terse letter from Christopher, not quite an apology, more an acknowledgement that their engagement had been a mistake for both of them. She filed it away and didn't think about it again. What she thought about instead was the future taking shape in unexpected ways. The garage continued to grow under Margaret's investment and Emma's management. They hired 2 more mechanics, both from the neighborhood, both getting second chances after rough starts. Jack taught them not just about cars, but about integrity, about treating customers like people who deserved respect regardless of what they could pay. Emma sold half her stock certificates, keeping enough for security, but using the rest exactly as she'd planned. Jack's medical debts disappeared overnight, Eli's college fund went from theoretical to fully funded. The garage expanded into the empty storefront next door, doubling their capacity. And Emma started teaching. It began small. Sarah Martinez asking if she'd teach a workshop on financial literacy at the community center. Emma said yes, expecting maybe a handful of people. 30 showed up, hungry for information about budgeting, credit, escaping debt cycles. She taught them everything she'd learned both in business school and in the past 3 months of living on $800 a month. The workshops grew into regular classes. Emma found herself becoming part of the neighborhood's fabric in ways that had nothing to do with money or status. She was just Emma, the woman who could explain compound interest and recommend the best cheap dinner options in the same breath, who managed the garage and taught night classes and somehow had become exactly who she'd needed to be all along. 6 months after that rainy night in the alley, Emma stood in the garage watching Jack teach Eli how to change a tire properly. The boy was 8 now, sturdy and confident, his fever-induced crisis a fading memory. He listened to his father with complete attention, asking smart questions, making mistakes, and learning from them. "You're smiling," Margaret Hartley observed, appearing at Emma's elbow. She'd become a regular presence at the garage, her advisory role evolving into genuine friendship. "I'm happy," Emma said simply. "Turns out that's worth more than I thought." "Sullivan Industries announced their new CEO this morning," Margaret said carefully. "Your father promoted from within. Someone named Jennifer Michaels? She's brilliant, better suited for it than I ever was." Emma felt no pang of loss, just satisfaction that the company would be in good hands. "Father made the right choice." "And you? You made the right choice too?" Emma looked at Jack, who'd glanced up and caught her watching. He smiled, that dimpled smile that still made her breath catch, and returned his attention to Eli's tire-changing lesson. She looked at the garage that had become hers in ways that Sullivan Industries never had, at the community she'd become part of, at the life she'd built from nothing because she'd finally been brave enough to choose it. "Yeah," Emma said, "I really did." That evening, after the garage closed and Eli was asleep, Emma and Jack sat on the apartment's tiny balcony watching the city lights. It wasn't much of a view, mostly other buildings and the street below, but it was theirs. "I was thinking," Jack said, his arm around her shoulders, "maybe it's time you stopped sleeping on the couch." Emma's heart skipped. "Jack Turner, are you propositioning me?" "I'm suggesting we look for a bigger apartment. One with a bedroom for Eli, a bedroom for us, and maybe some actual closet space." He kissed her temple. "Crazy idea, I know, moving in together after only 6 months." "We've been living together for 6 months." "Yeah, but officially, with shared rent and everything." He sounded nervous, like he was worried she'd say no. "I'd love that," Emma said, threading her fingers through his. "Though fair warning, I'm terrible at decorating." "Eli will help. Kids got opinions about everything." They sat in comfortable silence, planning a future that didn't involve any grand schemes or strategic moves. Just two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their old lives. "Emma?" Jack said after a while. "Yeah?" "Thank you. For choosing us. For staying. For—" He paused, searching for words. "For showing me that accepting help doesn't mean failing, that letting someone in doesn't mean losing myself." "Thank you for being worth choosing," Emma replied. "For teaching me that success isn't about money or power. It's about showing up for the people you love and doing work that matters." We're getting philosophical in our old age. We're 30-something, that's not old. Speak for yourself. I've got gray hair. I like your gray hair. Emma turned to face him properly. I like everything about you, actually. The stubbornness, the terrible jokes, the way you put Eli first every single time. Even the fact that you initially tried to talk me out of staying because you thought it was better for me. That was my one moment of selflessness. Don't expect it regularly. I won't. Emma kissed him, soft and sweet. I'll just expect you to be exactly who you are. That's more than enough. They stayed on the balcony until the city sounds faded into late-night quiet, making plans and dreaming small dreams that felt enormous because they were real. A bigger apartment. Maybe a vacation someday, just the three of them. Eli's birthday party next month. the garage's expansion into general contracting, all the ordinary miracles of a life well lived. Emma Sullivan, former CEO, runaway bride, current garage manager, and community educator, had lost everything society told her mattered: the money, the status, the carefully constructed image of success. She'd walked away from billions to scrape by on a salary that most people would consider poverty. And she'd never been richer, because wealth, she'd learned, wasn't in stock certificates or corner offices. It wasn't in designer clothes or penthouse apartments. Wealth was in waking up next to someone who saw you completely and loved you anyway. It was in a 7-year-old's laughter and the pride of work done with integrity. It was in choosing your own path even when everyone said you were crazy, and discovering that crazy looked a lot like happiness. Emma had run away from her engagement party in a torn wedding dress, lost and desperate, and stumbled into the life she'd been too afraid to choose deliberately. Now, sitting on a cramped balcony with grease under her fingernails and a borrowed future turning into a chosen present, she understood what Jack had tried to tell her that first morning at Rosie's diner. You couldn't find yourself by running away from the wrong things. You found yourself by running toward the right ones. And Emma had finally stopped running. She was home.